The mahogany boardroom felt smaller than usual, despite its impressive size. Maybe it was the weight of the 12 pairs of eyes fixed on me. Or maybe it was the suffocating knowledge that my own family had orchestrated this ambush. Harrison Enterprises' weekly board meeting had turned into my execution. I'm Victoria Harrison, though everyone calls me Tori. At least they did, until they decided I was a liability to the family business. As I was saying, my older brother James continued, standing at the head of the table where our father usually sat. The company needs a clear direction. We can't afford distractions. His eyes flickered to me meaningfully. I sat quietly, my laptop open to the presentation I'd prepared, the one they hadn't let me give. 6 months of research into digital transformation, a complete roadmap for modernizing our family's construction empire, now destined to remain unshared. Tori's ideas about digital integration are too radical, my sister Amanda chimed in, her perfectly manicured hands folded primly on the table. We're a construction company, not a tech startup. The irony of her statement almost made me smile. If they only knew about the meetings I'd had this morning, about the papers sitting in my briefcase that would reshape the entire industry. Father cleared his throat, his silver hair catching the morning light. Perhaps we should put it to a vote. His voice carried that familiar note of disappointment he perfected over my 32 years. All in favor of removing Victoria from her position as Chief Strategy Officer? I watched as hands rose around the table. James, smirking slightly. Amanda, not quite meeting my eyes. Uncle Robert, who taught me to read blueprints when I was 10. Aunt Patricia, who'd always said I was too much like my mother. Brilliant but difficult. Even Cousin Michael, who I'd helped get his first project management role, raised his hand after a moment's hesitation. It's unanimous then, Father announced. Though he hadn't voted himself, he never did. He preferred to let others do the dirty work while maintaining plausible deniability. Don't worry, little sister, James said, his voice dripping with fake sympathy. We'll make sure your shares are properly managed. You clearly aren't equipped to handle the responsibility. I closed my laptop slowly, deliberately. Is that all? You'll need to clear out your office by the end of the day, Amanda added. We have a reputation to maintain. A reputation. That's what they were worried about. Not the fact that our biggest competitors were going digital. Not the emerging companies disrupting the market. Not the billion-dollar opportunities they were too blind to see. Of course, I said calmly, gathering my things. I wouldn't want to damage the family name. This is for the best, Victoria, Father said, finally meeting my eyes. You're too much of a dreamer. Construction is about concrete and steel, not algorithms and apps. I stood, smoothing my charcoal gray suit, the one I'd worn to sign the papers this morning. The papers that would make tomorrow's meeting very interesting indeed. Just one question, I said, pausing at the door. Who's handling the Morgan development pitch tomorrow? James puffed up immediately. I am. $50 million contract. Biggest residential development deal in the city's history. Something you wouldn't understand, sister. It requires a traditional approach. Traditional, I repeated softly. How fitting. Don't worry your pretty head about it, Amanda sneered. Focus on finding a nice corporate job somewhere. Something with fewer responsibilities. I shouldered my bag, feeling the weight of the documents inside. Oh, I'm not worried. I'll be at the Morgan meeting tomorrow. You're no longer part of this company, James snapped. You can't just. I'll be there. I cut him off. But not as a Harrison. I opened the door, then turned back one last time. By the way, did anyone bother to research who owns Morgan Development Group now? The silence that followed me out was almost as satisfying as what tomorrow would bring. Almost. In my office. Well, my former office. I took one last look at the view. The city sprawled out below, cranes dotting the skyline like mechanical giants, each one representing a piece of the empire my grandfather had built, the empire my father had expanded, and the empire my siblings thought they were protecting from my modern ideas. My phone buzzed with a message from Marcus, my CFO. Everything's set for tomorrow. The papers are filed. Summit Industries is officially on record as Morgan's new parent company. I smiled, running my finger along the spine of my grandfather's old ledger, the only thing I planned to take with me. He'd written something on the first page years ago. The future belongs to those who can see it coming. My family was so busy protecting the past, they never saw the future sneaking up behind them. But tomorrow, in that same boardroom, they'd learn exactly what the future looked like. And it looked like me. The next morning, I dressed with particular care, not in the conservative suits my family preferred, but in a sleek black dress that spoke of power and precision. The kind of outfit you wear when you're about to change everything. As I drove to my real office, the penthouse suite of the city's newest smart building, I thought about the last family dinner before today's vote. The way they'd laughed when I talked about digital transformation. Construction is about bricks and mortar, James had declared. Leave the computers to the tech nerds. My phone lit up with updates from my team. Summit Industries' acquisition of Morgan Development Group was still under wraps, known only to a select few. The timing had to be perfect. Victoria, my executive assistant Michael, greeted me as I entered my actual office. The Morgan team is ready for their preliminary meeting. I nodded, taking in the wall of screens displaying real-time data from construction sites worldwide. Sites my family didn't know I controlled. And Harrison Enterprises. James just arrived at Morgan's offices for what he thinks is the pitch meeting. He's about to learn it's been moved to their main conference room. I smiled. Make sure our team is in position. I want everything recorded. The Morgan building's main conference room was designed to intimidate. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, including several Harrison Enterprises construction sites. Sites that would soon be under new management. I took my seat at the head of the table, hidden behind the conference room's smart glass walls. Currently frosted, they would turn transparent at the touch of a button. Timing was everything. James arrived first, strutting in with his presentation folder and his usual arrogance. Amanda followed, carrying the scale models they still used for pitches. So old school, so predictable. Father entered last, looking imperial in his custom suit. They arranged themselves around the table, not noticing the cameras discreetly recording everything. Morgan's running late? Amanda asked, checking her watch. Actually, I said, pressing the button that cleared the smart glass, revealing my presence. They're right on time. The look on their faces was priceless. James dropped his folder. Amanda's perfect posture crumpled. Father just stared. What are you doing here? James demanded. This is a private meeting. Is it? I opened my laptop, connecting it to the room's display system. Let's talk about privacy, shall we? About private companies, private acquisitions, and private transformations. The screens came to life, displaying Summit Industries' portfolio, billions in assets, hundreds of construction sites, and most importantly, complete ownership of Morgan Development Group. What is this? Father's voice was barely a whisper. This, I said, standing slowly, is the future you were too busy mocking to notice. Summit Industries, my company, has been quietly acquiring development firms, construction technology patents, and yes, Morgan Development Group, for the past 3 years. Amanda's face had gone pale. That's impossible. You don't have that kind of capital. No. I pulled up another screen. Remember that digital integration platform you all rejected? The one you said would never work in construction. I built it anyway. Licensed it to our competitors. Those algorithms you dismissed? They're now the industry standard. James lunged for his phone, probably trying to verify what I was saying. Our lawyers will do nothing. I cut him off. Everything was done legally, through shell companies and holding firms. The same way Harrison Enterprises acquired its first contracts. The same way grandfather built his empire. I just did it digitally. Father stood slowly. Why? Why go behind our backs? Behind your backs? I laughed softly. I tried to do this with you, presented the plans, showed you the potential. You all voted no. Voted me out. So I did it myself. The door opened and Morgan Development's executive team entered, my executive team now. They took their seats around the table, nodding respectfully to me. Ladies and gentlemen, I addressed the room. Thank you for coming. Today's meeting isn't about a pitch. It's about an announcement. Summit Industries is launching the largest digital transformation initiative in construction history, starting with all current Harrison Enterprises contracts. The room erupted in chaos. James was shouting something about family loyalty. Amanda had actual tears in her eyes. Father just kept staring at the numbers on the screen. You can't take our contracts, James finally managed. Actually, I pulled out a stack of documents. I can. Most of your clients have already agreed to transfer their projects to Summit. They prefer our modern approach, our real-time monitoring, our cost-saving technologies. All the things you said would never work in construction. This will destroy the company, Amanda whispered. No, I corrected. This will force it to evolve. You have 2 choices. Either adapt to the digital age, partner with Summit Industries, and learn how modern construction actually works, or become obsolete. And if we refuse? Father finally spoke. I smiled, the same smile he used to give me when explaining why my ideas wouldn't work. Then watch as every major client you have switches to a company that's actually ready for the future. Your choice. The next few days unfolded exactly as I'd planned. Harrison Enterprises stock plummeted as news of the Morgan deal spread. Not just the loss of the $50 million contract, but the revelation that their biggest competitor was run by the daughter they'd so publicly dismissed. I sat in my Summit Industries office, watching multiple screens track the fallout. Client after client announcing their switch to our digital platforms, industry analysts praising our innovative approach, and most satisfyingly, Harrison Enterprises board members frantically trying to contain the damage. Your father's here, Michael announced through the intercom. No appointment. I checked the security feed. Father stood in the lobby, looking smaller somehow. No power suit today. No air of authority. Just an old man realizing the world had shifted under his feet. Send him up. The office fell silent as he entered. His eyes took in everything. The wall of screens, showing real-time project data, the holographic building models, the teams of young engineers working on tablets instead of paper blueprints. This is quite an operation, he said finally. It's what I tried to show you, I replied, not offering him a seat. 3 years ago, when I first proposed digital integration. He nodded slowly. The board is meeting tomorrow. Emergency session. They're concerned. They should be. Summit just acquired Peterson Construction. Their digital infrastructure integrates perfectly with ours. Peterson? His face paled. But they're our biggest supplier. Where? I corrected. Now they're part of Summit's vertical integration strategy, along with advanced materials tech, global logistics partners, and several other companies you depend on. You're systematically dismantling everything we built. No, Father. I'm building something better. Something that should have included Harrison Enterprises if you'd all just listened. My phone buzzed. Another client announcing their switch to Summit. Father flinched at the notification sound. James resigned this morning, he said quietly. Amanda's talking about selling her shares. Smart move. They'll be worth half as much by next week. He sank into a chair without waiting for invitation. What do you want, Victoria? Money? Power? Revenge? I turned to face him fully. I want what I've always wanted. To modernize construction. To bring this industry into the digital age. To build something meaningful. By destroying your family's legacy? Legacy. I pulled up our latest project on the main screen. A revolutionary smart city development. This is legacy, Father. Not clinging to outdated methods because that's how we've always done it. Not dismissing innovation because it's unfamiliar. Not voting out someone because their vision threatens your comfort. A notification popped up. Our stock had jumped another 10% on news of the Peterson acquisition. The board, Father hesitated. They're considering options. Merger possibilities. I smiled. You mean they're hoping Summit will absorb Harrison Enterprises? Save them from becoming completely obsolete? Would you consider it? 2 conditions, I said, pulling up a document I'd had prepared for weeks. First, complete digital transformation. No compromises, no traditional holdouts. Second, I met his eyes, I run it. All of it. No family votes, no board interference, no more dismissing ideas because they're different. The board won't like that. The board doesn't have a choice. In 3 months, Summit will control 60% of the construction technology market. In 6 months, any company not using our platforms will be effectively locked out of major contracts. You can be part of that future, or you can watch it happen from the sidelines. He stared at the document for a long moment. You planned all this, from the beginning. No, I corrected. I planned to do it with you. You all chose to make me do it without you. My phone buzzed again. Pictures from James clearing out his office. Funny how karma works. If we agree, Father said slowly, what happens to the family? That depends on them. Amanda's actually quite good at project management. When she's not busy undermining me. James? Well, James should probably explore other opportunities. And you? Yes? You get to decide if you're ready to learn from your daughter. To admit that maybe, just maybe, the quiet one in the family meetings actually knew what she was talking about. He stood, straightening his jacket, a nervous habit I'd never seen before. The board meets at 9 tomorrow. I know. I own the building they're meeting in. As he turned to leave, he paused. Your grandfather, he would have been proud. Grandfather left me his private journals, I revealed. He wrote about seeing the future of construction, about wanting to modernize. You all were too busy protecting his old methods to realize you were betraying his actual vision. The door closed behind him softly. I turned back to my screens, to the empire I'd built while they thought I was failing. A message popped up from my team. Morgan project groundbreaking ceremony next week. Press wants to know if Harrison Enterprises will be mentioned in the announcements. I thought about family, about legacy, about the future my grandfather had dreamed of. Yes, I typed back. Tell them it's a story about evolution, about how sometimes you have to tear down the old foundation to build something stronger. Because success isn't just about proving people wrong, it's about proving yourself right. And sometimes the best revenge isn't destruction, it's creation. The family that voted me out, they'd learn that lesson tomorrow. And every day after, as they watch their quiet disappointment reshape an entire industry. I picked up my grandfather's old journal, reading his final entry. The future belongs to those brave enough to build it. Looking out over my city, at the cranes and buildings bearing my company's logo, I smiled. The future belonged to me now. And I was just getting started.
My name is Claire. My family doesn't need a cleaner. If you insist on becoming one, then get out of this house. Those were the words from my father, the man whose approval I had always longed for. Just once I wanted him to say, "I'm proud of you, Claire." Not out of obligation, but from genuine respect. That moment never came. It was on the night of my father Henry's 57th birthday. As always, a luxurious dinner was prepared, with a scene straight out of a movie. Crystal glasses were lined up, expensive wine was poured, and the whole family gathered around him. My brothers took turns sharing their success stories, just like they always did. My younger brother Owen talked about his promotion at a marketing firm, and my older brother Logan boasted about a new achievement in finance. My father listened, nodding with pride. "Well, this has been a great year for all of us," he said, raising his wine glass. "Owen, your results are no surprise. And Logan, your investment skills are truly outstanding. Both of you lived up to my expectations." Then I gathered my courage and decided to speak about my own plans. As graduation approached, I had considered various careers, but none of them felt right to me. Recently, however, I had come up with the idea of working in the cleaning industry, and I felt genuinely passionate about it. "Actually, I have some news about my future too," I said quietly. "After I graduate, I want to work for a cleaning company and eventually start my own small cleaning service." I was interrupted by the sharp sound of my father slamming his wine glass on the table. The room fell silent. "Cleaning?" he said with a voice mixed with disbelief and disappointment. "My daughter wants to become a cleaner? You must be joking." The word cleaner came out of his mouth like something filthy. "Cleaning is important work. It's part of the service industry," I tried to explain. "You think going around with a mop, cleaning other people's houses, is how you see your future?" He cut me off loudly. "Do you know how I raised you? How much I've invested in your education? And now you want to be a cleaner?" My mother looked at us with worry. "Henry, maybe you should let her finish what she's saying?" "There's no need to hear more," he said, waving his hand dismissively. "This family has produced 2 successful sons. And one," he paused as if searching for the word cleaner. Owen chuckled. Logan smirked, though uneasily. "I'm not just a cleaner," I said, my voice trembling a little. "I'm going to be a business owner. Is that really so strange?" "You think you understand business?" my father said mockingly. "You don't know numbers. You don't have connections. You're just a cleaner, and my family doesn't need a cleaner." "But Dad..." "Listen, Claire," he said, pointing at me. If you insist on continuing with that ridiculous plan, remember this: you'll be a disgrace to this family. I will not tell my friends and colleagues that my daughter makes a living scrubbing floors. If you truly want to become a cleaner, then get out of this house." The dinner table fell into complete silence. My mother stared at my father with wide eyes. Owen and Logan were no longer laughing. I slowly placed my napkin on the table and stood up. "Fine," I said, my voice surprisingly calm. "I'll leave, and I'll become a cleaner. But someday you'll regret this decision." "Don't make me laugh," my father said. "You won't last a month. You'll crawl back here on your knees." I didn't respond. I simply walked out of the dining room, up the stairs, and headed to my room. That night, I packed my bags and said goodbye only to my mother. She handed me a small amount of savings and hugged me with tears in her eyes. "You can do this," she whispered. "Take pride in whatever job you do, and one day your father will understand." The next morning, I left the house without saying goodbye to my father or brothers. The only resolution I carried was this: to become so successful they would never again dare to call me just a cleaner. It's been 7 years since that day. I built a premium cleaning company from nothing, and now I provide exclusive services to the wealthiest homes and offices in America. Years spent scrubbing floors at night, sacrificing weekends, constantly battling doubt. They all led to this. I poured my entire life into my work, believing that my father would one day be forced to acknowledge my success. I haven't returned to my family home once in the past 7 years. I haven't called or emailed my father or brothers. Only my mother, Dana, stayed in touch with me from time to time, and I kept her updated on my progress. During that time, I met my husband, Neil, got married, and had children. Even while taking on the new role of a mother, I continued to expand my business. Only my mother, Dana, knew about my new life. She would call me in secret, eager to hear about my success and the growth of my children. "You should tell your father and your brothers," she often said. But I was firm in my decision. "No, not yet. Not until I become so successful they can never ignore me again." And now I've come back. Not as a cleaner, but as a successful business owner, a wife, and a mother. I returned to prove my father's words wrong. To show him that I am not just a cleaner, but someone who has achieved a level of success he could never have imagined. One day, I received an invitation to my father's 65th birthday. Every year, the invitation arrived out of formality, even though I never attended. This year, I simply replied, "I'll attend." The reactions on the family message thread ranged from surprised emojis to uncomfortable silence. I could feel their confusion radiating through my phone screen. And finally, the day of my father's birthday party arrived. I chose my outfit intentionally. Not to seek approval, but to remind myself of the journey I've taken. Confidence in every movement, strength behind my gentle smile. When I pulled into the circular driveway, the quiet luxury of my car spoke volumes. "Are you ready?" Neil held my hand as he asked. There was a trace of worry in his calm blue eyes. "Mom, Grandpa's house is huge," 5-year-old Jonas shouted from the back seat. "Pretty," 3-year-old Sonia agreed, trying to lean out the window. "Kids, make sure you behave yourselves," I said, taking a deep breath. "Let's go." When we stepped inside, my brothers were already there, clinking crystal tumblers and laughing out on the terrace. My father sat at the head of the table, basking in self-importance, whiskey in hand, playing his favorite role as the successful patriarch. When his eyes landed on me, a flicker of confusion cracked through his smug expression. Then a contemptuous smirk spread across his face. "Well, look who it is. The losers come back? Finally remembered where her home is." All heads turned toward me. I could feel their judgment and curiosity hanging in the air like expensive perfume. I smiled calmly, just as I had rehearsed. "Hello. It's been a while, everyone. Happy birthday, Dad." But their expressions only grew more shocked. Behind me, Neil appeared, holding Jonas and Sonia by the hand. "This is my husband, Neil, and our children, Jonas and Sonia," I said. "Everyone, these are your grandfather and uncles." "Children?" My father gasped. "You're married?" My mother Dana rushed over, tears in her eyes, hugging her grandchildren tightly. "I'm so happy to finally meet you," she whispered, then greeted Neil. She gave me a conspiratorial glance. She had kept my secret. Owen and Logan sat with their mouths open. "Why didn't we know about this?" Owen demanded. "Because you never asked," I replied simply. "None of you reached out to me in 7 years. No one asked what I was doing. Only Mom knew." My father stared at the children, a mix of emotions flickering in his eyes. I could sense how much he felt he had lost by being shown this completely new family. He had missed their first steps, their first words, their first birthdays, every milestone. Dinner moved forward awkwardly. A strained politeness barely hiding a thin layer of rivalry. My mother fluttered around the table like a nervous butterfly, refilling wine glasses, laughing uneasily to fill the silence. My brothers had already gone through half of an expensive bottle, and the atmosphere grew heavy with familiar patterns and unspoken competition. Our little family sat quietly at the edge of the table. A black envelope rested inside my purse. Its weight felt like a loaded gun. The conversation flowed as if we weren't even there. "How's the company doing this quarter, Dad?" Owen asked, raising his crystal glass. My father smiled confidently. "Record-breaking as usual. But not everyone can handle executive-level pressure. You need real leadership qualities for that?" He looked at Logan with admiration in his eyes. "Fortunately, I have 2 sons who understand what real success looks like." I watched silently, saying nothing. His favoritism was no longer even disguised. Then his gaze slid down the table, and I could feel the atmosphere shift before he even spoke. "But there's one who slipped in. The cleaner." He declared it, gesturing dismissively toward me for the entire table to see. "While others are building real careers, she's still playing with mops and buckets. I'm proud of all my children and grandchildren, except for the cleaner and her kids." Cruel laughter erupted instantly. Owen nearly spat out his wine. Logan laughed so hard he slapped the expensive tablecloth with force. I remained completely still, hands calmly folded. I didn't react, I just waited. When their laughter finally subsided, I rose from my chair with deliberate slowness. I moved with confidence, already knowing I had won. "Actually, I brought something special for your birthday, Dad," I said, pulling a black envelope from my bag. "It's the gift you've wanted for decades." The room fell completely silent. Even the clink of cutlery stopped. I walked the length of the table and placed the envelope directly in front of him. He stared at it in confusion for a moment. "What is this supposed to be?" "Open it and see," I replied, stepping back with my arms crossed. He tore open the envelope with theatrical flair, as if expecting something trivial. The first thing he pulled out was a photo. But it wasn't just any photo of real estate. It was a portrait of a dream. "It's beachfront property," I said, placing the photo in the center of the table. A modern architectural masterpiece made of glass and steel stood boldly against the blue shimmer of the sea. The 3-story mansion appeared almost fused with the ocean itself, with massive floor-to-ceiling windows spanning the walls. Through those clear panes was a breathtaking panoramic view of the Pacific Ocean. "That's Sapphire Point, in Malibu, California," he said. "That's the place I always dreamed of owning." "You're saying the photo is the gift?" He scoffed. "The house you always dreamed of, right?" I said softly. "The place you used to talk about while sipping wine. The one you said you'd retire to someday. Remember?" His fingers moved to the documents next, and as his eyes began to register what he was seeing, his entire expression changed. "What is this? What the hell is this?" he demanded, narrowing his eyes up at me. "I bought it last week," I said, my voice gentle but clear. He froze, as if someone had hit pause. "The property deed is real," I added, glancing at the photo. "But I'll be keeping it for myself. As you said, I'm giving you the photo. A memory of something you'll never own." "What the hell is going on here?" "I think it's time I explained," I said, taking a sip from my wine glass. The dining room was wrapped in silence, and every eye was on me. Neil nodded beside me, gently squeezing my hand in encouragement. The children were playing in the living room with Dana, kept away from the adult conversation they didn't need to hear. I pulled a business card from my bag and slid it across the table. The words Claire Elite Services shimmered in gold foil. What I built isn't just a cleaning company. It's a premium service empire. We're now contracted by half of the Fortune 500. I have over 200 staff and an 8-figure annual revenue. My father stared at the card, then looked up at me with a bewildered expression. "That can't be. I've never heard of a company that big." "You have heard of it, Dad," I said, pulling out another card from my bag. This time, it read CES Consulting. "Actually, you've been paying me for the past 3 years." "What?" he gasped in shock. "CES Consulting, your company's confidential consultant. Your executive board has been making decisions based on my guidance. My team knows all the strengths and weaknesses of your business. I'm not just a cleaner, Dad. I'm your industry partner and advisor." Neil added proudly, "I'm an IT security consultant, also Claire's business partner. She leads the strategy, and I support the technical execution." He looked at me with love as he continued. "We designed the information systems together. Most of your company's data security infrastructure was built by me." Owen leaned forward, the color draining from his face. "You're the consultant who proposed the innovative workspace design and cost-saving strategies?" "That's right." I nodded. "My team is the one that increased your department's efficiency by 30%. We started in commercial cleaning, but we became experts in organizational efficiency and spatial utilization. Because we actually prepare the environment, we see exactly how to improve it. Brilliantly said, my love, Neil said, looking at me with pride. Claire isn't just a business owner. She's a revolutionary. She completely transformed the cleaning industry. Logan downed his whiskey in one gulp. You've got to be kidding me. The mysterious consultant Dad always praised was you? That's right, I replied. I'm the one your company paid millions to solve problems no one else could. Isn't it ironic? The daughter you called a loser was the one who saved your company's profits. From the living room came the sound of the children's laughter, a vivid reminder of how full my life had become, even in this solemn moment. My father sat in absolute silence. At last, understanding spread across his face. For 7 years, he had unknowingly been admiring my talent. And now he was face to face with the truth. The daughter he was once ashamed of, the one he cast aside, was the very business genius he had idolized. Why didn't you tell me? He finally asked. Why didn't you figure it out yourself? I replied. Why didn't you look into the name of my company? I never used my full name because I wanted to give you the chance to discover the truth on your own. But for 7 years, you never once tried. Neil placed a hand on my shoulder and said, in losing her, you really missed out on an extraordinary person, Henry. Silence filled the room. The weight of my 7-year absence, my struggle, and my secret success sank into them. But that's not all, I said, pulling out another black envelope. My work with CES Consulting included a full audit of your company. And I discovered something. The air in the room turned heavy. Neil looked into my eyes and gave a small nod. He already knew what I had found. What are you trying to say? My father asked nervously. I took the documents from the envelope. You've been embezzling company funds, skimming 5% off project budgets, funneling it through fake subcontractors into your private account. Logan gasped. That's criminal. Exactly, I said calmly. My team has spent the last 3 years collecting all the evidence. Transaction logs, wire records, fake contracts, everything. Owen stood up, raising his voice. That's a lie. Dad would never do something like that. Neil stepped in gently. Unfortunately, data doesn't lie. I personally traced every transaction. The evidence is airtight. My father's face turned pale, and he gripped his glass tightly. What are you going to do with that information? That depends on you, I replied. From the living room, we could still hear the joyful voices of the children and Dana. Their innocent laughter stood in stark contrast to the heavy silence of the room. Owen placed a hand on our father's shoulder. Is it true, Dad? After a long silence, Henry slowly nodded. It started with small amounts. The company was struggling. He tried to offer an excuse, but his voice trailed off. Logan stood up, looking stunned. Why would you do that, Dad? You always lectured us about integrity. I needed the money, Henry said quietly. For your college, this house, maintaining our lifestyle. I responded calmly. That doesn't justify it. You told me becoming a cleaner would disgrace the family, but the one who actually brought shame was you. Henry lowered his head, looking weaker than I had ever seen him. I've built strong relationships with every member of your company's executive board. They trust my judgment. I don't have the authority to fire you, but I'm in a position to advise them on your future." Owen stepped in. "That would ruin him. He'd go bankrupt." "Or to prison," I said coolly. Logan looked too shocked to speak. Owen's face turned red with anger and confusion. And Henry, he was completely broken. "All right," he finally said. "I'll accept your terms." Logan stared at him. "Why, Dad? Why take such a risk?" Henry lifted his face and, for the first time, showed true honesty. "Pride. I wanted everyone to think I was a successful businessman. Especially you and my friends. The truth is, I've been struggling for years. But I couldn't admit it." "So that's why you called me a loser," I said with understanding. "You were desperate to maintain your illusion of success, and the career I chose threatened your pride." Henry looked into my eyes for the first time. "That's right," he admitted. At that moment, Jonas ran into the dining room. "Daddy, Mommy, Grandma's about to cut the cake." He stopped, noticing the serious expressions on our faces. "Is everything okay?" Neil gave him a gentle smile. "Everything's fine, Jonas. We were just having a grown-up talk. We'll be right there." Jonas returned to the living room, and silence fell once more. "Is there anything you want to tell the kids?" I asked Henry. He shook his head. "They don't need to know. This is something I have to fix." Owen kept his hand on Henry's shoulder. "We'll help you, Dad. We'll get through this together." Logan nodded in agreement. "We're family." I looked at the scene before me, overwhelmed by complex emotions. The desire for revenge faded, replaced by a strange sense of peace. I, the one once called the family disgrace, now held the key to its future. I could have destroyed them. Instead, I chose to give them a chance to make it right. "Let's go have some cake," I said, standing up. "The kids are waiting." I walked slowly toward the living room, my footsteps echoing softly in the quiet house. What unfolded tonight had left a permanent mark on our family, not one of ruin, but perhaps something more meaningful. Something that might, in time, lead to healing and understanding. The laughter and innocent smiles of my children filled the air like sunlight through a cloudy window, offering me a kind of hope I hadn't realized I needed. Hope for a new beginning, for something better than what came before. Now, 6 months have quietly slipped by since that unforgettable evening. Half a year of reflection, change, and slow but steady transformation. I was sitting at a cafe table with my mother, Dana. "How is he?" I asked. She took a deep breath. "He's struggling. Ever since your father retired from the company, he's been truly lost. No severance. It's like the world he lived in collapsed. The company said they're moving toward younger talent, and apparently a particular consultant advised that his role was no longer needed." Stirring my coffee, I said, "He's just reaping what he sowed." "He's being forced to give up the luxury apartment," she added. "And his golf club membership, too. He finally apologized to me for the way he treated you." "It's too late," I said. "But at least he seems to have learned something." Dana reached across the table and held my hand. "He respects what you've built now. I don't know if that brings any comfort." I looked out the window. "It doesn't. but maybe it's a lesson. That no matter who's labeled the cleaner in a family, you never underestimate that person. I don't hate him. I don't need to anymore. I just let him face the consequences of his own choices. Dana sighed. He says he doesn't know how he's going to earn a living now. I have some advice for him, I said, rising and paying the check. The cleaning industry is always in need of good people. I'd be happy to teach him how to use a mop and a bucket. We both shared a small laugh. It was bitter humor, but also a release after years of pain. My father had finally come to understand the role of the cleaner he once so deeply disdained. And I had shown him just how powerful that role could become. All those years filled with scorn, years in which my brothers were endlessly praised while I was cast aside, treated as less, as if I didn't matter, had finally come full circle. The narrative had shifted. The power dynamics within our family had changed permanently, and I was no longer the person they could so easily dismiss, belittle, or mock without consequence. I no longer hungered for their acceptance, nor did I need their recognition to feel whole. That craving had withered long ago, replaced by something much stronger: self-respect. I had built something meaningful. A thriving business, a full and fulfilling life crafted entirely without their approval, and more importantly, without their involvement. It was mine alone. I was successful. I was self-sufficient. And after everything, after all the years of being underestimated, I was finally, quietly, and completely at peace with who I had become. I'm proud to welcome all of you here today as we celebrate a new chapter in the life of our only child, Wesley. When my father's speech ended, the room was filled with applause. I quietly lowered my hand, holding my glass to my lap, and looked down. Over 200 guests were focused on the couple standing under the lights: my brother, dressed in an immaculate white tuxedo, and his flawless bride beside him. But there wasn't a seat for me. The $40,000 invoice I'd paid for this ceremony flickered through my mind. It was me who had made this entire event possible. And yet, no one knew. Or maybe they knew and chose to look away. That's when it hit me. I was never really part of this family. Not in any way that counted. My name is Stacy Anderson. I live in a small apartment in Somerville, just outside Boston, and work in donor relations at a nonprofit organization. I'm not wealthy, but I take pride in my work, helping children in need every day. Today was my younger brother Wesley's wedding. He's the perfect son whose college and career were entirely funded by our parents. More than 200 guests gathered at a historic church outside Boston, showering the couple with applause and smiles. I used my savings to cover the cost of this wedding. But I was completely invisible in the celebration I had made possible. I flipped through the ceremony program I'd received at the entrance again and again, but my name wasn't printed anywhere. Not under family acknowledgments, not among the speakers, not in the list for family photos. I wanted to believe it was a mistake. But it wasn't. I wasn't acknowledged because, to them, I didn't exist. At the reception, I was directed to a table marked Caldwell's plus guests. Even there, my name wasn't among the place cards. I asked a passing waiter, "Excuse me, is there a seat here for Stacy Anderson?" He looked at me and hesitated. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Are you with the catering staff?" All I could do was laugh. I forced a polite smile and replied, "No. Then I quietly returned to the edge of the room. Then came the speeches. My father, Robert, stood at the mic and began in his calm, familiar tone. Thank you all for joining us today to celebrate the beginning of a new chapter in the life of our only child, Wesley. Only child? That phrase hit me like ice. What about me? I was the one who paid for the wedding. Did I not even exist in their memory? Dazed, I opened the congratulatory card on the table. Embossed in gold were the words, "To our perfect son, Wesley, you are our pride, our only child." A cold weight sank in my chest. I felt like a ghost. All those years I spent with Grandma until she passed. The small financial help I offered when Wesley started college. The gifts I sent every year for our parents' anniversary. All of it had been erased. It was as if I had never been part of this family at all. Flashbulbs kept going off. The cake cutting. The family photos with our parents standing beside the newlyweds. When the photographer called out, "Family of the Andersons, please come forward." My mother, Hillary, raised her hand to stop him. "We're all here already." I couldn't speak. I didn't even have the strength to try. As the reception neared its end, my Aunt Kathy quietly approached me. "Stacy, why are you over here? Where's your seat?" I gave a small, bitter smile and shrugged. There isn't one. No place card, no table. I'm not even counted as a guest. And I paid for the whole wedding. Her face darkened. "What? What do you mean? You don't have a seat? You paid for everything? What's going on?" I looked down and said softly, "It's okay. I realized something today. I was never really family to them." At those words, my aunt fell silent and gently took my hand. Strangely, I didn't cry. There was only a quiet certainty in my chest. As the reception came to a close and I began to leave the venue, Wesley rushed up to me, out of breath. "Thank you for coming today, Stacy. I really appreciate it." His words made me stop in my tracks. And I said calmly, "Congratulations, Wesley. But action speaks louder than words." I smiled faintly and turned away, leaving the venue behind. It wasn't until the chill of the night air brushed against my skin that I could fully return to reality. Holding up the hem of my dress, I made my way back to my small apartment. Once I reached home, I sat down at the kitchen table, opened my journal, and began to write slowly. June 12, 2024. Today, I let go of the illusion of family. From now on, I begin a journey to reclaim my own worth. The ink didn't smudge. The words were etched clean and steady onto the page. Days had passed since Wesley's wedding. Even after returning to work, I felt disconnected. Outside the office window, the early summer sunlight was bright, but inside me, a heavy shadow lingered. On the surface, everything was normal. Coordinating educational support programs for children, contacting donors, preparing for the charity event at the end of the month. My work at the nonprofit organization was busy and fulfilling. But somewhere deep inside, I still couldn't make peace with what had happened at my brother's wedding. That night, I came home and pulled out a cardboard box filled with old documents. It held notebooks used by my grandmother, Dorothy, before she passed away, letters she'd written to me, and records bank statements, payment receipts, things I hadn't looked at in years. But at that time, I felt an overwhelming need to confirm something. One statement caught my eye. It read, "Wesley Anderson wedding, Meadow Hall Garden, deposit $15,000. The date was exactly 8 months ago. Back then, I hadn't questioned anything. My parents had asked, and I'd paid. Because I wanted to do it for his happiness. The invoices that followed detailed venue rental, catering, floral arrangements, planner fees amounting to nearly $40,000, all withdrawn from my account. My memories blurred. I never wanted praise. Just a simple thank you would have been enough. Instead, I got that speech, without even a place card. As I kept searching the drawer, I found an old photo of Wesley's college graduation party. In the picture, my parents, Wesley, and a few relatives standing together. I managed the reception, greeted guests, arranged refreshments, everything. And yet, I wasn't in the photo. I checked social media, just to be sure. My mother had posted the photo with the caption, "Our perfect family." Hashtags, only sin, pride. The words pierced me like needles. Then I remembered I had sent her a message that day. Just, "Thanks for today, you must be tired." No reply. Just like always. Maybe I was the only one pretending not to see it. Going further through the box, I found florist invoices for my parents' anniversary party, email exchanges with caterers, bank transfers, all from me. All paid by me. Everything I had done it all. I opened a small box on the shelf. Inside was a photo of Grandma Dorothy and me, side by side. She was the only one who ever truly saw what I did. Back when I used to help around the house while my mother was too busy, she'd always offer kind words. "This brooch is for you. Don't forget to live for yourself, okay?" With those words, my grandmother placed the antique brooch into my hand while she was still alive. But after she passed on, my mother took the brooch without a word and handed it to Wesley. He's her only grandson, it's only right. And I accepted that, without question. That night, my phone buzzed. It was a message from my friend Jessica. "Stacy, your brother's wedding looked amazing. Saw the pictures on Instagram. Were you in any of them?" I stared at the screen for a while. No, I wasn't. Of course I wasn't. I didn't respond. When I closed my eyes, a chill ran down my spine. This wasn't an accident. It had taken time, but little by little, I'd been erased from my family's memory. Erased from their photos, made invisible even when I was the one organizing it all. Eventually, even my existence was denied. I sank deeper into my chair and buried my face in my hands. I couldn't take it anymore. A soundless cry rose from deep within. I was finally facing the truth. This erasure hadn't happened overnight. It had been deliberately, carefully constructed over years. And in the quiet of my heart, a small flame flickered. It wasn't anger, it was a clear, unwavering question. Why is my name nowhere to be found? And am I really okay with that? From that moment on, I was no longer just a shadow in my own family. I was preparing to reclaim my own life. That night marked a turning point. Piece by piece, I began unearthing the fragments buried deep in my memory. Why had my family gone to such lengths to erase me? Why had no one, despite my outward politeness and constant support, ever shown me real gratitude or respect? As I searched for those answers, I arrived at a deeper question. The apartment my grandmother had left me, this place. Before she passed, Dorothy had told me, "I'm keeping this for you. It's meant to be yours." It was a rare find in the Boston suburbs, old, yes, but well-maintained, peaceful, and filled with a kind of quiet warmth. It was where I began living on my own after college. I'd been covering all the utilities and maintenance, and though the rental income was modest, I saw it as a foundation for my future stability. But something felt off. I hadn't received any property tax notices for the past 2 years. They had always come directly to me before. I decided to check the city's online property registry. It took a bit of effort, but I had registered once before and managed to log in. And then I was speechless. The ownership name wasn't mine. Instead, it read Robert and Hillary Anderson. My parents. The transfer had been recorded just 2 weeks before Wesley's wedding. The exact time I had been footing the bill for the event. My blood ran cold. I told myself it had to be a mistake and refreshed the page again and again. But the name never changed. The apartment my grandmother had left me had quietly slipped out of my hands and into my parents' portfolio. I opened the cardboard box again and began digging for old documents. I remembered there was a copy of my grandmother's will somewhere. I found the faded envelope, tore it open, and read the lines. "I leave this apartment solely to my granddaughter, Stacy Anderson, because she is the only one in this family who possesses true responsibility and integrity." My chest tightened. She had seen me. She had truly understood. And yet her will hadn't been honored in the property record. Why? I immediately called my Aunt Kathy. She fell silent on the other end of the line before quietly saying, "So, you figured it out. I'm sorry, Stacy. Hillary said she was just organizing the household matters, and she insisted we didn't need to tell you." "But it's mine," I said. "Grandma told me that." "I know. I believe that too, but she's always been obsessed with keeping up appearances. She honestly believes Wesley is the only one worthy of inheriting anything." I couldn't bring myself to blame Kathy further. I could hear the conflict in her voice. But that didn't make it right. Next, I reviewed the property's maintenance records. Repairs, plumbing, repainting, roof patching, all paid directly from my bank account. Every receipt was meticulously filed. And yet, the rent? It had never reached me. The rental payments had been quietly redirected to a joint account held by my parents. It wasn't rage that surged through me, just hollow exhaustion. I had simply fulfilled my role, diligently and honestly. And somehow, that has made me easy to use, easy to erase. That night, I saved screenshots of everything: the forged registry, the payment history, my grandmother's will. I gathered them into a single folder and asked myself, this can't be something I let go. Enough years had passed in silence. I didn't want revenge on my family. I just wanted my life back, and for the things I had cared for to be returned. I exhaled, slowly and deliberately. From here on, it was a fight. But beyond that fight, I saw a glimmer of something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Ever since the day I discovered the apartment ownership had been forged, I endured countless sleepless nights. I would wake in the middle of the night, staring at the ceiling, forced to sit with the storm of anger and sorrow swirling deep inside me. But I knew I couldn't keep enduring in silence anymore. I had to reclaim my life, and my own worth that had been trampled for so long. I didn't want to act out of anger. But bringing the truth to light through rightful, legal means that was something I refused to compromise on. I decided to reach out to someone I could trust. Thomas Hansen. He was once the legal advisor for a children's protection nonprofit organization I had volunteered for. He's calm, rational, and fiercely principled. I knew Thomas would look at this without any bias and judge it for what it was. Once I finished telling him everything, he looked at me and said, "This case involves serious concerns of inheritance fraud and property record falsification. Our first step is to organize the evidence. Don't lead with emotion, lead with facts." I scanned each document from the mountain of papers on my desk and sent them to him. My grandmother's will, copies of the property registry, repair invoices, bank records showing the change in rental deposit destination, and notes from my call with Aunt Kathy. I also began compiling all proof related to the wedding expenses, bank transfers, emails with the wedding planner, statements from my account. "You didn't tell your brother about these payments?" Thomas asked. I nodded. "No. My parents asked me not to. They said they wanted to surprise him. And I believed them. You were deceived. But that doesn't mean you have to stay deceived. You have legal standing here." For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. Thomas quickly began taking the steps necessary to move forward legally. First, he brought in a handwriting expert to verify the alleged forged signature. They would compare Dorothy Anderson's signature on the altered registry to cards and letters she had written to me during her life. It took a week to receive the results. In the meantime, I combed through old messages, making sure I hadn't missed anything. And then, a week later, I received a call from Thomas. As expected, the signature used in the property transfer was forged. Sloppily, too. The analyst confirmed a very high probability that it was artificially mimicked by a third party. Something inside me crystallized. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a calculated theft of my rights and my inheritance. With the evidence in place, Thomas began preparing a formal notice to my family, demanding the return of the apartment's ownership and full reimbursement of the wedding expenses. Please review this draft and let me know if anything needs to be changed. The document he sent outlined the following demands in my name: immediate restoration of the apartment's ownership to me, a formal apology and compensation for the deliberate destruction or alteration of Dorothy Anderson's will, full reimbursement of all wedding expenses for Wesley Anderson, including interest, a clear warning that failure to comply would result in legal action and disclosure of the truth to the extended family. As I read through the document, I let out a deep, steady breath. This wasn't revenge. It was my effort to finally protect the worth I had allowed others to ignore. Still, my heart wavered. How would my parents respond? How much did Wesley actually know? And what would the word family even mean after this? But I knew I had to keep going. For the past 10 years, I had put myself second for their sake. Thomas ended with one final remark. "You're doing the right thing. In fact, I'm amazed at how composed you've been through all of this. You're not alone. I'm with you. I nodded quietly. And later that night, while making coffee in the kitchen, I whispered aloud to myself, I won't let anyone take anything from me ever again. Saying it out loud eased something in me. This life was mine. And finally, it was time to prove it. A few days after sending the notice, I received no formal response from my parents. Only one message from my mother. Stop this nonsense. You're only embarrassing yourself. This won't end well for you. Those words stirred no emotion in me. I couldn't even bring myself to feel disappointed. Just a quiet thought, this is who she really is. There was no more doubt in me. Through Thomas, the official complaint had already been filed with the court. All that remained was to present the facts one by one. But I chose to take one more step. Before the lawsuit began, I wanted my extended family to know the truth. About the will, about the forgery, about the wedding. For years I had stayed silent for the sake of appearances. Now I have decided to speak out. Aunt Kathy offered to help. You deserve to tell them why you've been hurt. They need to hear it from you. She coordinated a family dinner and reserved a private room in a restaurant. Uncles, cousins, and family friends from my father's side attended. My parents and Wesley were there too. When I entered, my mother forced a tight smile. My father stayed completely silent. As I handed out the documents I had prepared, the room fell completely quiet. Everyone's eyes dropped to the papers, occasionally glancing up at me. I spoke. This is why I'm taking legal action. Grandma's will was altered. The property records were forged. I was deliberately removed from the family. No one said a word. I don't want revenge. I just want to take back what is mine. I paused, then continued. I paid for Wesley's entire wedding, every cent. And yet on that day, I didn't even have a seat. I was treated like I didn't exist. Wesley looked at me for the first time, eyes wide. I had no idea. I didn't know you paid for the wedding, or about the apartment. I nodded. If you'd known everything, I don't think I could have recovered. That's why I want to believe you didn't know. But even so, you still have a responsibility. My mother stood abruptly. What good does this do? You think breaking apart this family will bring you peace? No, I said. It was already broken long before today. All I'm doing is to finally stand up for myself. And the truth deserves to be known. My father avoided my gaze, silent to the end. But after that silence, the documents I'd handed out began circulating quickly among the relatives. Through the hands of my aunt and cousins, the full extent of the wrongdoing spread, and the fact that my parents had forged my grandmother's will and embezzled her estate became a matter of public knowledge. The carefully maintained illusion of the Anderson family slowly, but surely, began to collapse. Weeks later, the court proceedings began. When I stood in the courtroom, I didn't shake. I didn't burn with anger. I simply planted my feet firmly on the ground. The evidence Thomas submitted was airtight. The handwriting analysis, the original will, payment records, Aunt Kathy's testimony. Even faced with these facts, my parents clung to tired denials. It was a mistake. We didn't mean any harm. Excuses shallow, desperate, and devoid of responsibility. Watching them, I felt something within me seal off quietly, permanently. And then, on the day of the verdict, the judge delivered the ruling in a calm, measured voice. The will of Dorothy Anderson is declared valid. The apartment is to be legally returned to the plaintiff, Stacy Anderson. Furthermore, the defendants are ordered to compensate her for all related financial damages. I closed my eyes gently. It didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a return to my life, to my dignity. It had been restored not with shouts or vengeance, but through a judge's calm voice in a quiet courtroom. 6 months passed. The apartment was officially returned to me. With the income it generated, I founded a new nonprofit, the Dorothy Project. It became both a shelter for children escaping abuse and domestic violence and a scholarship program for those in need. Launching it wasn't easy. But after surviving the long and painful battle with my family, I had nothing left to fear. Slowly, supporters began to gather, people who donated, volunteered, showed up. They weren't bound to me by blood, but by something far deeper, shared purpose and mutual care. Together, we started building something that finally felt like a real family. Meanwhile, the fall of the Anderson household was swift. Following the trial, my father's company lost the trust of shareholders and clients. Accounting irregularities were exposed, and he was eventually forced out. My mother, too, found herself quietly cast out from the social circles she once ruled. Everything she had done to preserve the image of a perfect family was stripped bare. I heard they sold their suburban house and moved to a modest apartment. My brother could no longer maintain the glamorous life that had always been propped up by our parents. With the financial support gone, he gave up his luxury condo and has since changed jobs multiple times. The title of the only child no longer drew applause. I never wanted revenge. All I ever wanted was to restore truth to my life. Many of my relatives, those who once turned away, began to distance themselves from my parents and brother. Some of them finally confronted the brokenness they had long ignored. And a few even came forward, clearly and kindly saying, "We're on your side." They supported my decisions, and some have started contributing to my nonprofit organization or volunteering in our programs. For the first time, I felt understood by people who shared my passion. Perhaps, in the end, every lie collapses under the weight of its own fiction. Justice isn't loud, but it's inevitable. One day, Thomas came by the Dorothy Project's office. He needed to go over some legal documents, but as he was leaving, he handed me a small envelope. This came through the Andersons' legal representative. They requested that it be returned to you. Inside was a small pouch. Resting within it was my grandmother's antique brooch. The one my mother had claimed should belong to her only grandson, Wesley, and was taken from me without a second thought. At last, it had found its way back to me. There were no words enclosed. But for me, that was enough. Somehow I felt my grandmother's love returning to me across time and betrayal. I sat for a while, the brooch resting in my palm. No, I hadn't forgiven them. But my shoulders felt lighter. I hadn't won against the past. I had freed myself from it. At the shelter, the children opened up slowly, one day at a time. One afternoon, a little girl handed me a paper flower she had folded and said, "I'm glad I came here. I want to come again tomorrow." I smiled and responded, "Of course you can. You're always welcome. This is your place now." The words I had once longed to hear from my family, I could now offer them to someone else. I had found my family in those who are connected through kindness, not genetics. This is the family I have chosen. And now, finally, I can say my name without hesitation. Stacy Anderson. Not someone's daughter, not someone's sister. Just me, standing on my own. Right now, I'm being labeled as the one who abandoned her family, as selfish. My name is Alexandra Owen. I'm 28 years old and a financial analyst at a major investment firm. I used to tell myself that if I just worked hard and kept my head down, one day I'd be acknowledged. My older brother, Jeffrey, 4 years my senior, dropped out of art school and has since drifted between barista gigs and delivery jobs. Still, he believes he's someone with talent. Why? Because our mother raised him to believe he was the most gifted child in the family. Our late father, on the other hand, was a gentle, brilliant man. He died suddenly when I was 16. Not long after, I started working part-time. Not for shopping trips or coffee dates like the other girls my age, but because I knew after my father's passing there was no one left to take care of me. While other kids were being dropped off at home by their caring parents, I rode my bike through dark streets to my part-time job, worked late into the night, and cycled back alone, exhausted. My first paycheck went straight toward a used laptop. It was my lifeline to continue my studies. No one ever asked if I was eating enough or sleeping. But when Jeffrey, the dropout, needed a new computer, our mother didn't hesitate. "This is essential for him to resume his artistic journey," she declared, purchasing a brand new MacBook Pro on her credit card. That twisted logic became my daily reality. My achievements were taken for granted. Jeffrey's failures were celebrated as creative exploration. Though he's 4 years older, I became the backbone of the family the moment our father passed. Jeffrey always had a convenient excuse and everyone accepted it. He couldn't hold down a job, quitting each one shortly after starting. Whenever he said, "The manager is stifling my creativity," our mother instantly took his side. "People like you just don't understand his brilliance." But how was I treated? When I earned a full-ride scholarship to a state university, my mother's reaction cut like a knife. "Couldn't you have picked a closer school? Travel expenses are a burden and we need money for Jeffrey's art supplies." When I got hired at one of the top investment firms, she barely looked up. "That job sounds intense. Just make sure you're available if Jeffrey needs anything, okay?" I can't recall ever hearing the words, "We're proud of you." I foolishly believed that if I worked harder, achieved more, maybe just maybe they would finally see my worth. But that hope was in vain. Somewhere along the way, I stopped being a daughter and became an ATM. When the house needed repainting, "Alexandra, can you help with the cost?" When Jeffrey wanted to take an online art course, "Alexandra, can you cover it until next month?" At first, I believed it was just a temporary rough patch. I agreed to help with just this one bill, but that quickly turned into covering everything from the electric bill to home repairs to our mother's gas money. I sent money every month. Not once did I hear a thank you, only ever-growing demands. "This month's tight. Can you send a bit extra?" I swallowed my frustration and convinced myself I was honoring my father's memory by keeping the family together. But each time I came home drained from work only to see Jeffrey lounging on the sofa, feet up, game controller in hand, my blood boiled. My mother would serve him his favorite meal, reminiscing about that beautiful drawing Jeffrey made in 5th grade, while completely ignoring my presence. I am not a heartless monster. There was a time I cared deeply about even the smallest of family troubles. But I refuse to live in a world where my exhaustion goes unseen while Jeffrey's failures are treated like Olympic victories. It all started with one phone call from my mother. I was away on a week-long business trip. Late at night, I was catching up on work in my hotel room when my phone lit up with her name. With a sinking feeling in my chest, I answered the call. "Alexandra, it's bad," she said, her voice trembling. "The bank just sent us a final notice. We haven't paid the mortgage in months. The house might be foreclosed." "What?" I shot to my feet. "What about the money I've been sending every month? Where did it go?" There was a pause. Then she choked out. "We were short on living expenses and Jeffrey's new painting classes." "You didn't pay the mortgage on Dad's house?" I asked in disbelief. "Please, Alexandra?" My stomach twisted. That house, Dad's house, was where I grew up. I could still feel his laughter echoing in the hallways. "How much?" I asked hollowly, already knowing I was about to give everything I had. $40,000. "If we don't come up with it in a week, we'll lose the house. The house your father loved." Her voice already held relief, as if she knew I wouldn't say no. Losing my father's house felt like losing him all over again. My chest tightened with the thought. When I opened my savings account, there it was, the money I had carefully set aside for years. It was meant to be for my own apartment. My way out. My way to finally leave my mother and brother behind. Now I had a choice: save my father's home, or chase my dream. "I understand," I said, exhaling deeply. "I'll transfer the $40,000. But this time, I need you to promise it has to go toward the mortgage." "Of course, honey." My mother's voice instantly brightened. "You really are such a wonderful daughter." After hanging up, I stared out at the city lights beyond my hotel window. I opened the bank app and processed the transfer, feeling my dream of owning my own place drift further away. But I told myself if I could save Dad's house, it would be worth it. The next day, I received the confirmation email. But nothing from my mother. In the past 10 years, I had been nothing more than a bottomless ATM to them. What crushed me wasn't the money itself. It was the way my mother and brother treated me. I don't think I've ever heard either of them say, "Thank you." Jeffrey still hadn't contributed a single cent. When I gently suggested he start looking for a job, my mother snapped at me. "He's discovering his artistic voice. Don't pressure him." Pressure? While I skipped meals and doctor's appointments, overworked and drained, just to cover his expenses? That imbalance burned inside me like acid. I began documenting every dollar I sent, a financial record of my exploitation. Not because I expected them to pay me back. I had long stopped believing in that fantasy, but every time I considered cutting them off, a new desperate message would arrive. Mom needs help with her medical bills. Or Jeffrey needs more for his art supplies. And I would cave again. Send more money, watch my dreams slip even further away. I believed that bearing everyone else's burdens until my knees buckled was strength. That maybe, just maybe, tomorrow they'd appreciate me. But the moment that illusion shattered, I knew something had to change, and it had to start with me. A few days after wiring the $40,000, I returned from my week-long business trip. My body ached. Every muscle begged for rest. Still, I stopped at the store and filled a cart with my mother's favorite groceries. Just like always. I pushed open the front door, arms full of grocery bags. Fresh salmon, organic produce, ready-made meals. Maybe this time, I foolishly hoped, they'd notice the sacrifice. When I pulled into the driveway, there was a luxury car I didn't recognize. I stepped inside and found my mother and Jeffrey laughing with a man I'd never seen before. "Oh, Alexandra," my mother said coolly when she noticed me. "This is Ryan, Jeffrey's new art dealer." He was just heading out. "Art dealer?" I asked, confused. "Someone finally sees my talent," Jeffrey said, beaming. "Ryan's organizing a solo exhibition for me at a gallery. We just need some upfront funding." And right then, a terrible suspicion crept in. After Ryan left and my mother closed the door, she turned to me, her expression transformed into something cold and unfamiliar. "Alexandra, we need to talk," she said, her voice slicing through the air before I could even put the bags down. "The $40,000 wasn't enough for the mortgage. We need more." My fingers went numb. "Not enough?" "I just sent the transfer." Her eyes narrowed, and she launched into a speech I could tell she'd rehearsed. "You make good money at that fancy firm. You're single, without any responsibilities. Meanwhile, we're struggling just to keep the house. How can you be so selfish?" The grocery bags in my arms felt like concrete blocks. I kept my voice steady. "Barely. For the past 10 years, I've covered the bills, utilities, medication, home repairs. I've kept this household running. And it's still not enough?" Jeffrey, lounging in Dad's old recliner with a game controller in hand, hit pause and chimed in. "We're family, right? Isn't sharing what families do?" I stared at my 32-year-old brother, fury surging through my veins. He had never paid a single bill in his life. How dare he lecture me about sharing? Something inside me cracked. Sharing? Sharing requires giving and receiving, Jeffrey. I've done nothing but give. What have either of you ever given me? I said. My voice was like the blade of a kitchen knife. You only know how to take. Alexandra. My mother's voice cut through the air like a whip. How dare you speak to your brother like that? Get out. Don't ever come back. What? I was stunned. She stormed toward my room and threw open the door. It was empty. I got rid of your things. You don't need them anymore, do you? I stood frozen. Everything was gone. My father's photos, the keepsakes from my childhood, the fountain pen my father gave me, the picture of us together, my college diploma gone. What about Dad's things? I asked, my voice trembling. I sold them to a second-hand shop, she said flatly. We used the money to fund Jeffrey's exhibit. What? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She had traded every memory of our father for the uncertain future of a son who'd never lifted a finger. How much does Jeffrey's exhibit cost? Can Ryan even be trusted? The words escaped before I could stop them. My mother looked at me with eyes as cold as ice. Leave, and don't ever come back, she said coldly. At that moment, something inside me gave out. I whispered, it's over. I turned toward the door, each step feeling strangely weightless. No one followed me. No one called my name. Only Jeffrey's familiar sneer trailed after me. The usual remarks so dramatic, just craving attention. I walked out of my father's house with nothing but a single suitcase, but my back was straight. As the rain began to fall, I walked away from my father's house. It soaked through my clothes and plastered my hair to my face, but with every step down that path, I felt a strange, incredible lightness spread through my chest. For years, I had convinced myself that what I was carrying was a duty to family. But it wasn't. It was a set of iron chains. And now, finally, gloriously, they had fallen away. When I got into the car, I looked over to the passenger seat and found my father's old photo, the one keepsake I had always carried in my bag. I whispered, Dad, I hope this is what you would have wanted. In the reflection of the rain-streaked window, I saw a new kind of resolve in my own eyes. I drove to a quiet gas station and parked in the far corner. My hands trembling, I opened the contacts list on my phone. My mother's name. Jeffrey's name. With a surprising steadiness, I pressed block on them both. I stayed at a hotel for a while, then moved into a modest apartment not far from work. The relief was like learning to breathe again after a decade underwater. I woke up to my own schedule, brewed coffee the way I liked it, and opened the curtains and let the light pour in. There was no blaring TV, no constant complaints, no 3 a.m. video game noise. Evenings and weekends were mine again. I read the books I'd been putting off for years. took online courses, and my phone no longer buzzed with new emergencies. I cut every financial tie. No more transfers, no more grocery runs, no more managing their medical appointments. My bank account finally stabilized. And then it began to grow. For the first time since my father's funeral, I started saving money. Simple thing. But something impossible while supporting 3 adults. My peaceful new life lasted for 6 months. One evening after work, I found a letter waiting for me, an unfamiliar envelope from a law office I didn't recognize. It simply read, "To Mizu Owen." Inside, there was a letter and a yellowed envelope. The letter began, "My name is Michael Norman, son of the late Michael Norman, who was a close friend and attorney of your father, Douglas Owen. My father passed shortly after yours. During a recent office relocation, I discovered documents your father had entrusted to him. Though 10 years have passed since his death, these were intended to be delivered to you." With trembling hands, I opened the yellowed envelope and found a letter addressed to me in my father's handwriting, along with a stack of notarized documents. "To my beloved daughter Alexandra," it began. As I read the words, I could hear my father's warm voice in my mind. "If you are reading this, I am no longer in this world. I've arranged for my attorney, Michael Norman, to pass these documents to you. There is something I never told you while I was alive. Upon my death, the house is to be legally transferred into your name. All necessary documents are enclosed." The letter continued. "I ask, if it is within your heart, to allow your mother and Jeffrey to stay in the house after I'm gone, but only if they treat you with respect and gratitude. This is not an obligation, only a kindness." Tears blurred my vision as I read through the attached paperwork. Sure enough, it confirmed that my father had left the house to me. The truth was finally out, and with it, a new surge of fury and clarity. I contacted the bank immediately and requested the mortgage payment records. When the report arrived a few days later, I was stunned. The $40,000 I had sent hadn't been applied to the mortgage at all. Going through the detailed statements, I found that the money had been used to pay off Jeffrey's credit card charges from high-end furniture stores, resort bookings, and something labeled art career development expenses. I sat at my computer, shaking with fury and betrayal. And I made my decision. The next day, after consulting with my lawyer, I sent a formal notice of eviction. Just hours later, my phone rang. It was my mother, seething with rage. "Alexandra, why did we receive an eviction notice at the house?" Her voice was shaking. "The bank says they're foreclosing." I took a deep breath to steady myself. "The house is legally in my name," I said calmly. "It's been that way since Dad died, and you knew that." I heard her gasp on the other end. "And the $40,000 I sent?" "It was never used for the mortgage," I continued. I pulled the bank statements. "I have all the proof. Jeffrey's career was depending on it." She protested. "And you sold off Dad's belongings to pay for that?" My voice turned cold. After a long silence, she spoke in a small voice. "What are you going to do?" "You have 1 week to pack up and move out," I said quietly. "Dad gave me a choice, and I've made mine," she shouted. "You'll regret abandoning your father's memory. This house meant everything to him." I hung up without a word. The messages came flooding in afterward. "We have nowhere else to go. Your father would be ashamed of you." And from Jeffrey, "You're tearing this family apart over your selfish pride. Selling out your own blood for money? Disgusting." I didn't respond to any of it. They didn't understand. This was never about the money. It was about dignity. The day before the eviction deadline, I was in the office, doing a final review of the quarterly report. As I focused on the screen, the front desk line rang. "Mizu Owen, there are 2 people here to see you. A woman and a man. They say they're your mother and brother?" There was a confusion in the receptionist's voice. For a moment, the blood drained from my face. "Thank you. I'll be right there," I replied. When I reached the lobby, my mother and Jeffrey were waiting. She had tears in her eyes. He stood with his arms crossed, radiating anger. I felt the weight of my co-workers' glances through the glass wall as I led them into a conference room. I shut the door behind us. "What are you doing here?" My voice was low, measured. "You came to my workplace? Without notice? What else were we supposed to do?" My mother's voice trembled. "You wouldn't answer our calls or messages. How do you expect us to just act normal after the way you treated us?" Jeffrey cut in. "Eviction? Are you serious?" I caught the eyes peeking in from the hallway. "Lower your voice. This is my workplace. We're your family." My mother's voice cracked. "And you're throwing us out into the street. For 10 years I supported you," I said, keeping my tone as even as I could. "Not once did either of you thank me. Even after I sent you $40,000, it didn't go to the mortgage. It went to your luxuries." "It was an emergency," she insisted. "A cruise is not an emergency," I replied, pulling out the printed bank statements. "A new television? Art supplies for Jeffrey?" Jeffrey stepped forward, face flushed with anger. "You betrayed this family. Dad would be ashamed of you." My voice turned to ice. "Dad left the house to me, and he said you could stay only as long as you respected me. Instead, you exploited me. And when you were done, you threw me out." My mother covered her face with her hands. "Where are we supposed to go?" she sobbed. "Please, Alexandra." "That's your problem now," I said, rising to my feet. "I've sacrificed my life for you for a decade. No more." "This isn't over," Jeffrey muttered, his voice low and threatening. "We grew up in that house. I have rights." "You have no legal rights," I replied, hand on the door. "Now leave, right now, or I'll call security." My mother tried one last time, her voice brittle with desperation. "If your father knew." "He did know," I said, turning back. "That's why he left the house to me. He knew I'd need to protect myself." I walked them out of the building. On my way back, I ducked into the restroom. The face in the mirror was pale, but in my eyes I saw something I hadn't seen in years: resolve. The moment of release had finally come. It's been 1 year since that day. I sold my father's house, bought the condo I'd always dreamed of, and earned a long overdue promotion at work. I no longer drain my income for someone else's benefit. I save, I invest for me. One afternoon, the company's legal department contacted me. The $40,000 case had concluded, and the court fully upheld my claim. My mother and Jeffrey were ordered to repay the full amount, though, due to their lack of funds, they were placed on a monthly installment plan. "They're already behind on payments," the legal advisor told me. "We can file for garnishment if you wish." "Proceed," I said without hesitation. Appealing to sympathy is their only strategy. Last week I saw Jeffrey in the parking lot of a grocery store. The arrogance he once carried was gone. He walked with slumped shoulders. When he saw me, his face tightened for a moment, but he quickly looked away. A friend later told me he'd just lost his 5th job, still insisting that no one understands his artistic vision, though in reality he couldn't even get hired for anything remotely related to art. He couldn't show up on time, follow instructions, or hold a job longer than a few weeks. I have artistic talent. Why doesn't anyone see it? Jeffrey was overheard complaining at a local cafe. How am I supposed to create anything in a tiny apartment where I can't even stretch out a canvas? That art dealer, Ryan? He vanished the moment Jeffrey failed to pay the upfront fee. No one ever came forward to buy Jeffrey's work. Meanwhile, my mother now juggles 2 part-time jobs and still struggles to pay rent on their small apartment. Last month, she called me. Her voice was pleading. "Alexandra, please, can we reduce the monthly payments? We're really struggling." Where was that concern when I was struggling for 10 years? I asked calmly. "But I'm your mother," she cried. "And you kicked me out of our home. Don't you remember?" After I hung up, I felt no guilt. They were simply living the consequences of their choices. Her final message came last week. "Your father would be heartbroken if he saw this," followed by, "A collector might be interested in Jeffrey's work. We just need some funding to prepare for a new exhibition." I replied briefly, "Dad wanted me to protect myself. Your lack of respect was your choice." Then I blocked her and took a deep breath. 10 years of sacrifice, forgotten in a heartbeat, just to be dragged back into another artistic opportunity. The spring sun outside my window spoke of a new beginning. I looked at my father's photo on the shelf and smiled. "It's okay, Dad. I'm finally living my life now. I no longer live for them." I thought about reconciliation once, but that hope vanished because they haven't changed. They only reach out when their pockets are empty, not when their hearts are full of remorse. I chose to continue walking my path with unwavering resolve. Now free from the chains of the past, I move forward with confidence. Beyond the door I opened, pink and blue balloons floated in the air, and laughter filled the party venue. On the wall, large letters spelled out, "Welcome, Baby Harrison." The table was piled high with baby shower gifts. And there was my mother, Gina, beaming as she guided the guests around. This was supposed to be the venue for the housewarming party I had planned using $4,000 of my own money. Instead, it had been repurposed into a baby shower for my stepsister, Brittany. "Michelle, you finally made it." My mother spotted me and waved. Standing just behind her was my stepfather, Richard, his face smug with pride. And there, lounging on an extravagant couch, was Brittany, the center of attention. She wore a green maternity dress, gently caressing her baby bump. I returned the smile and stepped inside. Outwardly composed, I was seething inside. "Congratulations, Brittany." I approached and handed her the small gift I had prepared. She was 25 years old, yet had never achieved anything on her own. Still, she enjoyed the unconditional affection of our parents and lived a life where she was always treated like someone special. "Thanks, Michelle." She looked at me with a slight hint of caution. She avoided eye contact. Because she knew. She knew exactly who this party was originally meant for. "Everyone, may I have your attention?" Suddenly, my mother stood in the center of the room and tapped her glass. "Today is a special day. Brittany and Kevin are expecting a new life, bringing even more joy into our family. Let's raise our glasses in celebration." Glasses clinked. Cheers filled the room. And in that moment, something within me crystallized. Never again will I allow anyone to deny my worth. I raised my glass, drawing everyone's gaze, and I prepared to reveal the truth I had buried for 18 long years. I am Michelle Smith, 32 years old. I'm the Vice President of Global Insight, the creator of the Market Pulse system, which has brought in hundreds of millions in profit for the company. After I informed my grandparents of my recent promotion, their congratulatory message arrived quickly. I was replying to them when my secretary Tiffany entered the room. "Michelle, a document just came in from the legal department." "Thanks. Oh, by the way, Tiffany, how are the preparations going for the housewarming party at the new villa?" "Everything's on track. The real estate agent just dropped off the keys. The lakefront view is absolutely stunning." I nodded, gazing out the window at the Boston skyline. The new villa by the lake in Massachusetts wasn't just a property. It was a dream I had chased for years. The morning mist dancing on the water's surface, the trees rustling in the wind, and above all, the silence untouched by anyone else's demands. It was my sanctuary. The small gathering I had planned for the weekend was meant to mark the beginning of a new chapter in my life. Although there's one thing, Tiffany added, hesitating. She picked up the tablet from my desk and scrolled. There's an email from your mother. It's about the party preparations. The moment those words left her lips, my face stiffened like stone, and a cold shiver ran down my spine. My relationship with my mother Gina couldn't be described as merely complicated. When I was 12, my father James passed away from cancer. After that, she began to change. Without even a proper grieving period, she married a man named Richard Harrison, and little by little, I began to fade from her new life. Things worsened even further when Brittany, my stepsister, was born from that marriage. My mother's affection, my place in the home, and eventually even my chance at education, everything was taken from me under the guise of Brittany's needs. I'll check on it later, I told Tiffany. But inside, a deep sense of unease had already begun to grow. Because in my entire life, messages from my mother rarely ever brought good news. The shadows of the skyscrapers outside stretched long across the floor. A glance at the clock on my office wall told me I had only 15 minutes left before the next meeting. I took a deep breath, calmed my thoughts, and turned my attention back to the new project proposal laid out in front of me. The rollout plan for Market Pulse in the Asian market represented the next giant leap in my career. Even now, as the Vice President of Global Insight and a recognized figure in the industry, I never let my guard down. Because from a young age, I had learned the harsh truth: let your guard down, and everything you value can be taken from you. After a grueling 3-hour board meeting, I returned to my office, my steps heavy with exhaustion. Tiffany was waiting with a worried look. "Michelle, about the email from your mother, I think it may need a response." I let out a deep sigh, sat down at my computer, and opened the email with tense fingers. The subject line was plain: "Michelle, there's an important update about the party." And attached to it was a single photo. The moment I opened the photo, it felt as though the blood in my veins stopped cold. The lake house living room was decorated with pink and blue ribbons, and across the wall were the words, "Welcome, baby Harrison." My housewarming party had been transformed without my knowledge into a baby shower for Brittany. I instinctively grabbed my phone and dialed my mother. "Hello, Michelle? Perfect timing. I was just about to talk to you about the party. What is that photo? Why is the house decorated for a baby shower?" I cut her off, my voice sharp and demanding. "Michelle, just listen. This is really important for Brittany." Her voice had that familiar pleading tone, but underneath, it carried the same manipulative edge I had known since childhood. It was the tone that said, "I'm pretending to listen to you, but the decision's already been made." This whole mess had started about a month ago. I'd been completely immersed in the international rollout of Market Pulse, a major project at Global Insight, and hadn't had time to handle the detailed planning for the housewarming of the new lakefront villa I'd bought in Massachusetts. So I transferred $4,000 to my mother, a generous amount, and asked her to take care of everything: the invitations, catering, decorations, and schedule for the day. It wasn't just a party. It was a celebration of years of effort and achievement, a symbol of a new chapter in my life. Why would you turn my housewarming party into Brittany's baby shower? That's a completely different event. I was struggling to keep my emotions in check. "But she's pregnant, Michelle. This is huge for the family." She spoke like she was explaining something self-evident, something I clearly just didn't get. "Richard and I were going to be grandparents for the first time. Isn't that something worth celebrating together as a family?" And there it was again, the same old pattern that had ruled our lives for 18 years. When it came to Brittany, everything and everyone came second. That pattern hadn't changed since my mother married Richard when I was 14. I get that. But her celebration should be a separate event. "I've already invited friends and colleagues. They're more than welcome. We can all celebrate Brittany together." I let out a slow breath. Somewhere in the middle of this conversation, I already knew nothing I said would matter. My opinion had never been part of the equation. Wait, have you already sent the invitations? Yes, they went out yesterday. We titled it a special celebration with the Smith family. I wanted the details to be a surprise. Anger surged inside me, but I held it down as I spoke. I sent that $4,000 for my party. Oh, Michelle, come on. You're successful. You just became vice president. You bought a beautiful new villa. Brittany has nothing. She needs this celebration. That same logic, always the same. Because I'd succeeded, I was expected to give up what was mine for her. Everything's already in motion, she continued, with no trace of guilt. Richard's thrilled. He can't wait to become a grandfather. As I listened to her words, I drew in a long breath. Is Brittany's boyfriend coming to the party? I asked calmly. I needed to know if he was in on this. Of course. Kevin is such a wonderful man, so kind and intelligent. He truly loves Brittany. He's a programmer at an IT firm and has a promising future. Richard really likes him. They're a perfect couple. I see, I said quietly. Isn't it wonderful? Thank you, Michelle. Oh, and Grandma and Grandpa are coming, too. We're going to celebrate Brittany and Kevin in style. That stopped me. Wait, Grandma and Grandpa are coming? Yes, I just spoke to them on the phone. They sounded excited. That at least was a small relief. I see. Well then, I'll see you at the party. I tried to keep my voice sounding casual. I knew by then there was no point in arguing with her. What mattered was conserving my strength and choosing the right moment to act. After I hung up, I looked at the photo of the lake house resting on my desk. I took a deep breath and began to steady my thoughts. In business, I'd learned one thing above all: always focus on the end game. This, too, needed to be handled with strategy. And I had already made up my mind. I picked up my phone and sent a message to my grandparents. See you at the lake house on Saturday. There's something important I need to tell you. The moment I hit send, something inside me settled. The weekend would mark a turning point in my life. Please, this is my room. It has memories of my father. On my way home from the Boston office, I found myself thinking back to when I was 16. It had been 4 years since my father passed away, and 2 years since my mother remarried. Michelle, Brittany needs a bigger room. There was no warmth in her voice. She had changed after my father's death, and after marrying Richard, she became a completely different person. Now, the only one she seemed to focus on was her daughter with him, Brittany. My bedroom had been my only sanctuary. Sunlight poured in through the south-facing windows. The walls were lined with photos of my father, and the bookshelf he gave me on his last birthday was filled with his books. Please don't take this room away from me. My plea was ignored. Richard spoke coldly instead. I am the head of this household. My decisions are final. Richard prided himself on appearances, always presenting the image of the perfect family. To him, I was simply a flaw in that image. The next day, when I came home from school, all my belongings had been moved to a small guest room. My bedroom became Brittany's. Where's my bookshelf? Dad's books? I asked, my voice shaking. We put them in storage. You're not a little girl anymore, my mother replied. Brittany deserves the best environment. I found the dismantled bookshelf and boxed up books in the storage room. I opened one box and pulled out a physics book, my father's favorite, the one he was reading before he passed. Inside the front cover, he had written, "To Michelle, knowledge is the greatest treasure. With love, Dad." That was the moment I made a vow. Someday, I will stand on my own. Things only got worse from there. Eventually, I was even excluded from the family photo. When I asked, "Am I not part of this family?" my mother simply said, "You weren't standing in front of the camera." But I knew it was deliberate. That night, I clutched a photo of my father and whispered, "One day, I'll find my own path. I promise. On the day of the baby shower, I drove to the lake house. I parked the car and took a deep breath. Several cars were already lined up in the yard. Guests had already arrived. From the window, I could see pink and blue balloons. The front door bore a sign, "Welcome, Baby Harrison." I grabbed my handbag and checked my reflection in the mirror. A tailored navy blue dress, flawless makeup, and a face radiating confidence. No one could guess the storm brewing inside me. This ends today, I told myself. Then I stepped out of the car and walked toward the entrance. I took another deep breath and reached for the doorknob. Michelle, you have the gift of understanding. It doesn't come from blood, it comes from the heart. Those were the words of my grandfather, Frank. Even now, they echo in my mind. It was the spring before high school graduation. I had just received my acceptance letter from Princeton and returned home bursting with joy. But that night, I overheard a conversation between my mother and Richard in the study after dinner. "She's not my blood. Why should I pay for her?" Richard's voice was filled with contempt. "But she's still my daughter," my mother replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "Brittany is the only one who matters. That kind of money should be saved for her. Princeton is a luxury." The next day, my mother told me they couldn't pay for my tuition. "Brittany's at a private school, and we need to think about her future education, too. You can go to the community college in town." That weekend, my grandparents came to visit. Even after my father died, they had never let go of me. "Richard won't pay for your tuition." My grandfather asked calmly. "We'll cover all of it," my grandmother said firmly. "Money only has value when it's used for the right reasons." Your father would agree. My years at Princeton opened up a new world. Everything I am today, I owe it to them. And with those thoughts, I stepped into the villa I had built. About 40 guests were already gathered. My mother wore a white dress. Richard was wearing his usual gray suit. Brittany, glowing in a green maternity gown, sat beside Kevin. I spotted my grandparents standing quietly in the corner and made my way toward them through the crowd. If anyone could be called family, it was them. The courage to speak my truth came from the unconditional love they had always given me. Holding on to that, I took the microphone. "May I have everyone's attention, please?" My voice echoed through the room and conversations fell silent. My mother's smile froze. Richard frowned. "Thank you all for coming today. Brittany, congratulations." Brittany smiled faintly, but there was a trace of nervousness in her eyes. This party was originally planned as a housewarming celebration for my new villa. I transferred $4,000 to my mother for that purpose. But my celebration was repurposed. It became a baby shower for Brittany. A murmur rippled through the crowd. My mother stood frozen, her face drained of color. Richard began to approach me. "Michelle, now's not the time for this," he said in a low voice. "No, Richard. This is exactly the time. And everyone needs to hear it." The moment the words left my mouth, he slapped me across the face. A stunned silence fell over the room. Several men rushed in to restrain him. I steadied myself through the sting, then said, "You just made it worse. I'm going to tell them everything. For 18 years, I have been second in this family. No less than that. I've been an invisible shadow." I turned toward my grandparents, standing quietly in the corner, and continued. "After my real father passed away, I was treated like I didn't belong to this family. My room was taken from me. My education was denied. And now, even the celebration for my new home has been stolen." Kevin looked at Brittany, confusion and shock on his face. Maybe he had never truly understood the dynamics of this family. But today, I'm here to make one thing clear: I am not a victim anymore. I've stood on my own. I've succeeded. I raised my glass and smiled toward my grandparents. A toast to Frank and Helen Smith, my true family. They made it possible for me to attend Princeton. Today I stand here as Vice President of Global Insight, the creator of the Market Pulse system, and a woman who built her own life. Richard's face darkened. He stepped forward, voice low and threatening. Keep going, and you'll be cut off from this family entirely. No inheritance. Nothing. His threats didn't shake me anymore. There's nothing I want from you, Richard. At that moment, my grandfather stepped forward, his voice calm but commanding. Actually, I have something to share with all of you. The room fell silent again. There was an undeniable presence in his tone, the quiet authority of a former professor. 3 months ago, Helen and I updated our will. Our home in Cambridge, our entire investment portfolio, and all of our assets will be inherited by Michelle. I could see my mother's face turn utterly white. Dad, what are you talking about? My grandmother stepped in. Gina, this is the result of your choices. You chose your new family and abandoned your daughter. We're simply honoring that choice with our own. But Brittany, my mother murmured. She has you, my grandfather replied flatly. You who ignored Michelle hurt her and today robbed her of joy once again. A heavy silence settled over the room. Suddenly, Brittany shot to her feet, her voice rising in fury. You ruin everything. This is supposed to be my special day. Brittany, Kevin said, gently taking her arm, you used Michelle's money to throw this party? What the hell? You just shut up. Brittany snapped, yanking her arm away. Then Richard raised his voice sharply, stepping forward. Enough. Michelle, get out. You should have never been invited. The room froze. Conversations died mid-sentence. I slowly set down my wine glass, meeting his gaze squarely. Over 10 years of suppressed pain burned quietly inside me. Get out? I gave a bitter smile. Richard, you can't be further than the truth. I own this lake house. Michelle, that's enough. My mother tried to interject, but I raised a hand. No, what's enough is this. I walked slowly toward Richard. For years, you pushed me out of this family, but today is different. This house is mine. I earned it. I paid for it. I stood directly in front of him as his face flushed red. And if anyone needs to leave, it's you. He trembled with rage but couldn't say a word. He had finally realized that my success had completely shattered his authority. My grandfather placed a hand on my shoulder in quiet support. My grandmother joined him, smiling gently. I'm going home with my real family. Before leaving the room, I glanced back one last time. What I saw was a family falling apart, a crumbling facade. Richard's face was red with rage. My mother sat slumped, defeated. Brittany stood crying, her expression a mix of confusion and disbelief. Outside the villa, my grandmother approached me with concern. Michelle, are you all right? I'm fine. Thank you. I smiled. Let's go home, my grandfather said softly, resting his hand on my shoulder. 3 years have passed since that day. I am now the CEO of Global Insight, succeeding the previous CEO Daniel and becoming the youngest CEO in the company's history. Before his retirement, Daniel personally named me as his successor. Michelle, no one senses market movement like you do. This company should follow your vision into the future, he told me. I still remember the way those words moved me. Market Pulse, the data analytics platform I created, had expanded globally and evolved into a multi-billion-dollar business. Our system is now used by government agencies, Fortune 500 firms, and global investment firms alike. When I was featured on the cover of Fortune and named the top of the 30 under 30 list, my grandfather cried tears of joy. Michelle, your father would be so proud of you, wherever he is, he said. That was the highest praise I could have ever received. From my new penthouse, I can see the Boston skyline stretch endlessly beneath me. At the center of my private study are the bookshelf and collection of books that once belonged to my father, rescued from storage by my grandparents. When I open the physics book he was reading before he passed, still marked with his handwriting, I feel as though we're having a quiet conversation across time. On weekends, I retreat to the lake house, now renovated exactly to my taste, where I invite my grandparents and savor the peace. On the spacious deck, I play chess with my grandfather and listen to his reflections on life. That, to me, is the greatest luxury. My grandmother still tends to her herb garden, and there's nothing more grounding than sipping her homemade herbal tea while gazing out over the still waters. She often says, "Michelle, we are defined by our choices. You walked a difficult path, but you never gave in to bitterness or vengeance. That is your true strength." Meanwhile, my stepfather struggled to keep up with the rapid changes in the tech industry and was eventually demoted, or so I heard. The company he had worked at for over 20 years shifted to younger leadership. His outdated management style and obsolete technical skills were publicly criticized under the name of corporate restructuring. Ironically, the new data analytics system his company adopted? It was Market Pulse, my system. In the end, he was given a choice: accept a 50% pay cut or take early retirement. Prideful as ever, he chose to resign only to discover his expected retirement package had been slashed. He faced significant financial loss. Once a man who looked down on his colleagues, he found himself cast aside, with no network left in the industry and no path forward. My mother's real estate business suffered in the downturn, and together they were forced to sell their luxurious home and move into a much humbler place. And the bedroom that had once been mine, taken from me for Brittany's sake, probably belongs to someone else entirely now. Life has a way of making its own corrections. Brittany gave birth safely, but her relationship with Kevin fell apart. According to distant relatives, she's now living back at home with her parents. After becoming CEO, I founded an education foundation, the James Smith Memorial Scholarship. Named after my father, the foundation provides educational opportunities for children like me, those who have had their sense of belonging taken from them. I've cut ties with my mother, Richard, and Brittany. And in doing so, I finally found peace. My grandparents are my loyal team, mentors who appeared at just the right moments in my life. They are my real family. Daniel remains a trusted mentor of mine to this day. His wisdom continues to guide me through every difficult decision. Each morning, as I walk into my office, I pause to greet two framed photos on the wall. One is an old family picture, me, my father, and my grandparents. The other was taken the day Market Pulse was patented, my entire team beaming with joy. The pain of my past, the brilliance of my present, it all shaped who I am. Blood doesn't define you. You've always had value, from the moment you were born, my grandfather once told me. And now I truly believe that. I've let go of every false relationship, and I've stepped forward into a life built with people who genuinely see and respect me. They say success is the best revenge. But for me, success is never about revenge. It is about self-realization. Now, I live not to prove my worth, but to pursue my passions and follow my curiosity. I smiled at the photos and walked toward the boardroom. Because today, once again, I choose to live my story. My name is Brittany Hansen. As I approach my 32nd birthday, I finally feel like I've created a place where I truly belong. This is the culmination of a dream I've spent 10 years building. A seaside cottage I purchased just a few months ago, funded by a decade of savings and the inheritance my late father left me. It's a space that is entirely mine. Since finishing graduate school, I've been working as a marketing analyst. On weekdays, I wear a suit and bury myself in numbers at an office in the city. On weekends, I escape to this cottage, surrounded by nature, and let the quiet restore me. This is the life I've envisioned for the past 10 years. It's been a month since I bought the place. The renovations are finally done. Here, I don't need anyone's opinions or interference. It's a reflection of my own sense of beauty. Today I hosted a birthday party here. I invited my brother, his wife, their baby, my mother, and a few relatives. Since my father passed, our family has slowly drifted apart. The phone calls dwindled, the get-togethers became rare, and before I knew it, even calling us family felt like a stretch. Still, I never wanted to shut them out completely. I longed for a day when we could gather again as a family. I thought maybe, just maybe, if we could share a meal and laugh together, even for a short while in this peaceful home by the sea, something might begin to shift. Of course, I prepared everything myself. The shopping, decorations, food prep, every last detail. More than the hassle, I focused on creating a pleasant time for everyone. I moved with that quiet hope that maybe, in a warm and gentle atmosphere, the awkwardness between us as a family might begin to soften. This was my way of reaching out. This cottage is my place to start over. And the birthday party was only the first step. I woke up earlier than usual. The decorations and food I had worked on late into the night still played in my head like a checklist. But the serene ocean view outside my window seemed to wash all that away in an instant. White and gold balloons I had picked out floated gently in the living room. The homemade lemon cake waited patiently in the fridge. On the kitchen counter, I arranged caprice, dips, and baguettes. Plush cushions lined the sofa. Everything was arranged with care, aiming for perfection from every angle. Not to earn praise, but because I didn't want to betray the effort I had poured in. Just after 1 p.m., my mother was the first to arrive. Wearing a bright pink dress and heels that didn't suit her age, she greeted me with a wide smile and a kiss on the cheek. "This is your favorite cheese, right?" she said, handing me a grocery store bag. I couldn't bring myself to place it next to the gourmet cheese in the fridge, but I simply said, "Thank you," without a word of protest. Next came my brother, his wife, and their 6-month-old son Lucas. Relatives soon followed one after another, and the living room quickly filled with chatter. Wrapped in a fluffy blanket and smelling of baby powder, Lucas drew more attention than anyone else I'd invited. "He's getting so big. Looks just like his dad. He's smiling, how adorable." The relatives surrounded him with squeals of delight, snapping pictures as if it were his birthday party. I smiled, but slowly, something inside me began to deflate. No one touched the food I had prepared as the Lucas photo shoot dragged on. Everyone held up their phones, shouting, "Look here." Or he just smiled again, as shutters clicked nonstop. From behind the kitchen counter, I silently watched the food grow cold. Once the excitement settled a bit, one of the relatives looked around and said, "Brittany, this house is absolutely gorgeous. That ocean view is incredible. The air even feels fresher out here." Another nodded in agreement. "It's like a little resort. Honestly, more relaxing than a hotel." I gave a polite smile and replied, "Thank you." That's when it happened. My mother raised her glass and casually said, "It really is lovely, isn't it? I bet if Jeffrey and Kristen lived here, it would be perfect for raising Lucas." The moment those words fell, the air grew tense. The once laughing relatives fell silent. I didn't miss that shift, I felt something quietly crack deep in my chest. When I didn't respond, keeping my smile frozen in place, my mother went on as if it were obvious. I mean, Brittany, you're in your city apartment during the week, right? This place is basically sitting empty. And Lucas needs a bigger space. Our current place has so many stairs, it's dangerous for a baby. I stared into my glass of lemon water, swallowing my words. I told myself to stay calm. But something inside me was starting to tremble. It's not a demand, more of a suggestion, Kristen added. If you let us use this house, you could enjoy your time in the city without worry, and it would be a huge help to us. It's a win-win, don't you think? I'm not going to lend out this house. I spoke quietly, but clearly. The room froze. How can you be so cold? My mother raised her voice. This place is way too big for one person. Don't you have any sense of helping your family? I thought I've already shown more than enough of that, I replied. And now, after all this time, you show up and ask me to give up my cottage. Am I just some kind of convenient wallet to you? I could feel the anger and sadness quietly boiling over inside me. Jeffrey, my brother, shrugged and laughed. There she goes again. Brittany always makes it sound like she's the only one who's ever done anything. Just because she's managing Dad's inheritance, she thinks everything's her accomplishment. But we're family too, aren't we? And this family asks me, on my birthday, to give up my home? That shut everyone up. The only sound was Lucas crying, slicing through the heavy silence. My mother stepped closer, eyes wide, and whispered sharply. You're only thinking about yourself. Do you really believe you'll find happiness by shutting out your family? I didn't look away. So I'm cold for not giving up my house? Have you forgotten how much I've already done for you? Honestly, if this is how you view everything, I don't think we're speaking the same language anymore. The moment those words left my mouth, something inside me shifted. After that argument with my mother and brother's family, the living room felt suffocating. The laughter had vanished. Everyone sat in awkward silence, avoiding each other's eyes. Unable to bear the tension, one relative after another grabbed their coats and left without a word. By 3 p.m., I was the only one left in the room. No one said, "That was a lovely party." And yet, I felt a quiet sense of satisfaction deep inside. While cleaning up, I noticed Lucas's blanket folded at the corner of the table. I picked it up, ran my fingers over its soft texture, then gently placed it in a basket. My birthday isn't something to be hijacked for someone else's convenience. Neither is this house. Or my life. The front door closed with a final thud as the last relative left. What remained in the living room were stacks of paper plates, half-drunk glasses of wine, and the untouched lemon cake I had baked myself. Of course, I murmured with a small laugh. I told myself I hadn't expected much, but somewhere deep down, I had hoped this year would be different. That hope was the most painful part. My relationship with my family has always been complicated, a history of compromises and countless sacrifices. My mother, Diane, once tried to build a warm home. But that changed a few years before my father passed, when her affair came to light. After that, he shut himself off emotionally, fell ill, and eventually left us forever. His will clearly stated, "No inheritance shall be left to my wife." I pitied her. I gave her one of my credit cards to help with daily expenses. I supported her. And then there's my brother Jeffrey. My mother always bragged that he graduated from a prestigious university, but the truth is, his business is failing. He barely scrapes by, supporting Kristen and their 6-month-old son. And yet, on social media, he poses as a successful entrepreneur and paints a picture-perfect family life. Their values and mine just don't align. Why should I be expected to share what I've worked so hard to build? There's a difference between offering support and enabling dependence. Inviting my mother and brother was my way of opening the door to reconnect after years of distance since Dad's dads. I stood in the kitchen and opened the fridge to grab a cold sparkling water. Just as I reached for a glass, the front door slammed open behind me. "I'm not done talking to you." It was my mother, standing in the doorway. Her face was flushed, eyes a little unfocused. She had probably been drinking a few leftover beers in the garden. "The party's over. You should go home," I said calmly. But she wasn't listening. "How far are you willing to go with this selfishness? Is this cottage that important to you? Do you even care about your family? I've told you this more than once. I bought this house with my own money, my own decision. And Dad's inheritance? He left you nothing. That was his, and now it's mine. If you still can't understand that, then there's nothing left to discuss." In that moment, her expression twisted. Without a word, she raised the beer can in her hand and deliberately tilted it over my head. "I didn't raise you to become someone like this." The cold liquid ran down my hair, over my neck. I stood frozen, speechless. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw my father's photo on the wall tremble slightly. "Pathetic," I muttered. My mother snorted. "Say what you want, but your brother's family will be moving into this house. We're family. We have that right. You have until next month to get it ready." And with that, she flung open the front door and left. The stale mix of beer and her perfume lingered in the air, making the whole room feel sour. I stood there for a while, unable to move. My hair clung to my scalp, my t-shirt soaked and cold against my skin. There's no way she can do that. I won't let her. That was the thought running through my head as I went to grab a towel from the bathroom. On the way, my phone buzzed. Patty's name appeared on the screen, one of the few colleagues I truly trusted. "Happy birthday, Brittany. I'm sorry I couldn't make it today. Did something happen at the party?" Her voice was gentle, but what she said next hit me like a weight in my chest. "Your mom posted something on social media. It's spreading kind of fast. She's written some really harsh things about you. I thought you should know." For a moment it felt like the air had left my lungs. Without finding the words, I steadied my phone and, with trembling fingers, opened the social media app. The first thing that caught my eye was a post from my mother. All I wanted on my daughter's birthday was one small thing: for her to let us live in her big house so my grandson could have space to grow. But all I got was a cold rejection. Maybe I failed as a mother. I set my phone on the table and took a deep breath. Now was not the time to react emotionally. I had to stay calm. If I responded, I'd only be cast as the heartless daughter again. I kept repeating that to myself. But things were already spiraling out of control. Like a wildfire, the post was attracting comment after comment from strangers. How can someone be so selfish toward their own family? robbing a baby of his future, what a monster. Poor mother. No wonder the daughter turned out like that. My timeline was flooded with venom, faster than I could scroll. I just stood there, unable to move. Am I the villain? It wasn't anger I felt. It was something emptier. Like everything I was had been flattened into the cold daughter by people who didn't know me at all. It was so incredibly unfair, it made my chest tighten. I changed out of my soaked clothes and stepped into the shower. No matter how much I scrubbed, I couldn't wash away the feel of the beer, my mother's words, or the sting of that post. That night, after cleaning up, I sat on the sofa and stared at the photo of my dad. "Dad, I'm not wrong, right?" He smiled gently from the frame. That smile was the only thing that still gave me comfort. That's when I made a decision: no one would ever be allowed stain my life again. The next morning, I stared at myself in the mirror. Dark circles under my eyes, puffy eyelids. Even after washing my hair several times the night before, I could still swear I smelled the beer. "Why did it come to this?" I whispered. I never lived for anyone's approval. But I also knew if I stayed silent, I'd only become more of a scapegoat. My mother didn't stop. Even after the party, she continued her passive-aggressive attacks on social media. My daughter no longer sees me as her mother. I raised a woman with no compassion. She kept painting me as some heartless villain. She even resorted to using anonymous accounts to harass me. I was reaching my limit, emotionally and mentally. But I wasn't here to cry as a victim. And I couldn't let my life be hijacked under the excuse of family any longer. I called Thomas Gale. He was the attorney who had handled my father's estate. He specialized in family law, and I knew he would understand. "Hi, this is Brittany Hansen. I need your help." That afternoon, I visited his office. The moment he saw me, he seemed to understand. "I can tell by your face something serious happened, didn't it?" I recounted everything that had happened at the party, one incident at a time. The beer, the social media attacks, and most of all, how my brother Jeffrey and his wife Christine, supported by my mother, tried to take over my home like it was theirs. Thomas nodded, taking notes silently as I spoke. "You've endured more than enough already." Those words nearly brought me to tears. But I held them back. I wasn't here to cry. Not anymore. For the defamation and harassment, the first step is to gather evidence. Save every post and message. We can also file for a restraining order, he explained, calmly walking me through the steps. A few days later, a restraining order was issued against my mother through the court, and we also initiated a defamation claim for her online posts. Immediately afterward, I took the next step. I froze the restricted credit card I had given her. Ever since my father passed, I'd been supporting her with a limited monthly allowance. She used it freely, never thanked me, and simply expected it. There was no reason to keep giving. And finally, I made the biggest decision of all. The house my mother currently lives in, originally my father's, is legally co-owned by me and my brother, according to Dad's will. But for years she's occupied it as if it were hers. A few days later, with the documents Thomas had prepared, I finally sat down with my brother. We met at a cafe terrace, under a sun so bright it felt like it could burn. "Brittany, seriously, Don't you think it's too cold-hearted to kick Mom out? Cold-hearted? I repeated. You do remember what she did to me, don't you? Pouring beer over my head on my birthday? Smearing my name all over social media? And now I'm supposed to stay silent about it just because we're family? But if you take the house from her, she won't have anywhere to go, he said. I paused for a moment before answering. That's a consequence of her own choices. I wasn't born to take care of her. She disrespected Dad's will, and she used me. That house legally belongs to you and me. But she's treated it like her personal property for years. I've had enough. My brother stirred the ice in his glass for a moment, then let out a sigh. All right, but there's one condition. At the very least, give her enough time to find a place to live. I understood, but that's not out of family duty. It's basic human decency. With that, the formal notice prepared by Thomas was delivered to my mother. It included the enforcement of the restraining order, a defamation warning, and an official request to vacate the house within 30 days. There was no reply. No call, no email. The only change was in her social media profile. This is what it said. Even if my family abandons me, I will never lose my pride as a mother. One day, the truth will be known. She was portraying herself as the victim, as if I were some heartless daughter. No apology, no remorse. Only a performance and appeal to the public as the tragic, misunderstood mother. And still I didn't regret anything. If anything, I felt lighter. One evening, while sipping coffee on my cottage terrace, I got a message from Thomas. You made the right decision. You've drawn a necessary boundary for the sake of your own life. I repeated those words silently to myself, again and again. When the day came for my mother to vacate the house, I chose not to be there. 3 days before the official deadline, my brother simply texted me. Mom left? That was all. I spent that day at the seaside cottage, picturing her walking away with boxes in her arms. I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel anything. But the cold beer, the insults on social media, and years of unspoken pressure, none of it shook my resolve. I had no idea where she went after that. My brother never contacted me again. And I didn't go looking. As autumn deepened, the sea outside my terrace grew darker, colder. Mornings called for thick cardigans, and at night I wrapped myself in a blanket, sipping tea. Life, quietly but surely, moved forward. Then one day, I got a message from a college friend. Brittany, I heard something. Someone saw a woman who looked like your mom sleeping on a bench in the city park. It might be nothing, but I thought you should know. Something stirred in my chest. Even so, I turned my phone face down. Inside me, there was both a part that wanted to go see for myself, and another that insisted, there's no way that could be true. But neither feeling was strong enough to move my feet. A few days later, over lunch with Patty, I mentioned it in passing. They said Mom might be sleeping in a park. Patty set down her fork and looked me straight in the eye. Brittany, this may feel like some sort of test, but it's not your responsibility. She made her choices. You don't owe her a return to that past. I nodded quietly. That night, I couldn't sleep. Eventually, I grabbed my keys and drove through the quiet roads toward the cottage. When I got there, I didn't even go inside. Instead, I walked straight to the beach. Under a sky too dark for city lights to reach, one image kept flashing in my mind. My mother's proud, almost defiant smile. A tightness gripped my chest at the thought, had I missed something behind that smile? I stopped walking, and standing in the freezing ocean breeze, I whispered into the night, "Am I being cruel?" The waves drowned out my voice, but somehow, the sound of them returning to shore felt like an answer, gentle, but undeniable. Still, I couldn't grasp what the answer was. Days passed. To distract myself from that spiral of unanswerable thoughts, I threw myself into work. As the year came to a close, the city lit up with laughter and Christmas lights. But I kept my distance. Instead, I decided to hold a small party just for myself. I decorated my apartment, made a modest meal, and baked a simple cake. Of course, I didn't invite anyone. I wasn't sure if my heart simply wasn't in it to be with someone, or if I just didn't have the courage to let anyone in. All I knew was it would be a party just for me. I played my favorite jazz, lit some candles, and placed my father's photo on the shelf in the living room. "Good job making it through the year, Brittany." I raised my wine glass and toasted to myself. If no one else would celebrate me, then I would. If no one else understands me, then I'll be my own strongest ally. Next to my father's photo, I placed a small white flower. If he could see this home, I know he'd say, "You did well." I could almost hear his warm voice deep inside my heart. That night, I slept soundly for the first time in what felt like forever. When I woke the next morning, winter sunlight was spilling gently through the curtain gap. The air was still crystal clear, as if the whole world were quietly blessing the choices I had made. Shortly after the new year, I received a message from my brother. "Vanessa gave birth yesterday. It's a girl. Both mother and baby are doing well." Reading those short lines, I felt nothing. Maybe in the past, my heart would have tightened, but not now. Softly, I whispered, "I see more to myself than anyone else." A few minutes later, another message came. Also about Mom. My hand froze on the phone. I could almost feel the familiar weight of silence stretching through the screen. After she left the house, she stayed with someone she knew for a while, but that didn't last. Apparently there were some issues. Now I've heard she's living near a church park. Apparently the church sometimes hands out food. I was speechless. Not surprised, exactly. I guess, deep down, I had already expected this. My mother's not the kind of person who can live off the kindness of others. She lives by her own rules. Always has. That's why I had to draw the line. Then came my brother's suggestion. "A lot has happened, but once things settle down, do you think we could talk again? Maybe it's too late, but I think Mom's sorry. I've been thinking about a lot, and I think I understand you a little better now. So, could we meet, just once?" I stared at the screen, sipping my coffee slowly. My answer was already clear. It just took me a little while to find the right words. "Congratulations on the baby, but I'm not the person I used to be. What I've endured, how many times I was stepped on, you can't erase that with 'maybe it's time.' I'm sorry, I'm not seeking reconciliation." I hit send and gently placed my phone face down on the table. Outside, the winter wind rustled through the trees, but inside, my heart remained calm. I no longer lived to be forgiven. and forgiving others isn't my form of salvation. Realizing that I finally began to live my own life. I am no longer someone who's expected to offer parts of herself just because that's what family does. Being told to give up my cottage on my birthday, being criticized for refusing, attacked online, it took all of that for me to finally see the truth. True family doesn't demand your sacrifice. It's the kind of bond where just being present is enough to support one another. I set my phone aside and took another sip of coffee. Outside the window, the winter sea shimmered quietly. And in that moment, I was reminded again. This peace I fought to protect, that I chose, that I kept, was the most precious thing I had. I hope she doesn't get discharged. The moment I heard those words from behind the wall, my heart was frozen. It was the night I came home after spending 10 hours on the road, just released from the hospital. Through the door, I overheard my mother and brother speaking their shocking truth. It was the moment I realized to them, I was nothing more than a burden. That morning, the sunlight had poured through the hospital room window, gentle and warm, as if it were celebrating my new beginning. The doctor assured me my recovery was going well, and I was allowed to leave earlier than expected. When I found out that I had a tumor on my thyroid, I told my family that it was just a minor issue, so they wouldn't worry. Today was my mother's 57th birthday. I'd taken it as a sign that my discharge fell on the same day. If I showed up looking healthy, maybe she'd feel relieved. That thought alone drove me to push myself to make the trip. I drove for 10 hours, taking several breaks along the way. On the passenger seat were a ribbon-wrapped gift box and a prescription for my medication. My body wasn't fully recovered, but I wanted to see my mother's happy face. So I knowingly pushed past my limits and kept driving. I arrived at the house a little after 9 p.m. The porch light was on at the home tucked into a quiet residential neighborhood. I hadn't lived there for years, but my hand trembled slightly as I slid the key into the locks. It was proof that this place still weighed heavily on my heart. Without knocking, I gently opened the door. Just as I was about to call out, the voices of my mother and brother from deep inside the living room made my entire body freeze. Dad left that house to her. I want it. I hope she doesn't get discharged. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard. But then my brother continued, destroying any doubt. It's true. She said it was just a small tumor, but that's probably to keep us from worrying. Honestly, if something happened to her, it would actually make things easier. Less stress for us, especially with the loan. I stood motionless behind the door, holding my breath. My heartbeat grew erratic. A ringing filled my ears. The sound of my heartbeat was so loud it drowned out their words. She's trying to take everything for herself. Grandpa's house, the trust fund. All while playing the poor victim. My mother's voice was laced with hatred and envy. Ever since my parents divorced 15 years ago, something had always felt strained in our family. My mother supported the household with part-time jobs, and we lived in financial instability. My brother was forgiven for everything. I was expected to be perfect. My mother placed all her hopes and responsibilities on me. "You're the dependable one," she said, yet mistakes were never allowed. When my grandfather left the house, my mother said nothing. But I remember her attitude growing sharper after that. She believed anything she needed should naturally become hers. If someone else had what she wanted, she saw it as her right to take it back. My brother played along with her, staying close. On the surface, he was friendly and easygoing. But he always belittled my efforts and pain, laughing, "You're too serious." He echoed my mother's feelings to dodge any responsibility. I quietly shut the door and exhaled deeply. The cold sank into my bones. I took the gift box from my bag and gently set it beside the entrance. I put the key back in my pocket and returned to my car without making a sound. I had pushed myself to come here, fresh out of the hospital, just to celebrate her birthday. And yet, all I heard was how they wished I hadn't come back. As I started the engine, I realized something. There was no need for me to return to this house ever again. I took a deep breath and picked up my phone. From my contacts, I found the name Samantha and called her without hesitation. "Hello, Samantha? Sorry it's late. Do you have a moment?" Samantha didn't sound surprised to hear my voice. She simply said quietly, "It's okay. Lauren, did something happen?" Things got a little messy at my parents' house. I'll explain later. Can I come over? Of course. I'll leave the door unlocked. Take your time. Samantha is my cousin. She's 7 years older and has always felt like a big sister to me. She had long sensed the tension between me and my mother. Whenever I was hurt, she would gently stay by my side. She had struggled in her own family, too. She once told me that she had spent years carrying the burden of her parents' expectations. Even after gaining independence, she wrestled with how to maintain distance from them. That's why, when I said, "I don't know how to deal with my mom," she never criticized me, she just listened. More than my mother or brother, Samantha felt like a real family. I truly believed that. As I drove, I felt exhaustion sting my eyes. My body, fresh from the hospital, was honest. I was running on empty physically and emotionally. Still, going back to that house was no longer an option. I arrived at Samantha's house just before midnight. She stood at the entrance in her pajamas, and as soon as she saw my face, she hugged me without saying a word. "You've been through so much." Just those words made everything I had been holding back collapse all at once. Without uttering a sound, I buried my face in her chest and cried. "It's okay. You're safe now. No one here will ever hurt you." With those words, Samantha guided me into the living room. Her house felt nostalgic and warm. Photos from her travels and softly colored paintings hung on the walls, creating a comforting atmosphere. Later, as she boiled water, I took my prescribed medication and medical file out of my bag. Next to them was the key to the house I inherited from my grandfather. I'm not going back to that house anymore. When I said that, Samantha just nodded without a word. With her, I didn't need to make excuses or pretend. I could speak from the heart. I thought it meant something being discharged on the same day as Mom's birthday. So I brought her a gift and went home. But then I heard her say, "I want the house Dad left to her. I hope she doesn't get discharged. I can't trust anything anymore." My voice trembled. But no tears came. "Do you know what your aunt has been telling people about your illness?" I shook my head. "She's been saying you were on the verge of death, crying at work and around the neighborhood, saying, 'I thought we were going to lose her.'" I closed my eyes. Somewhere inside me, I had already suspected as much. To her, pity is a kind of asset. Maybe she's keeping herself afloat by playing the tragic mother. Samantha's voice was quiet, but within it was deep understanding and pain. But Lauren, you have the right to live your own life. You don't have to play anyone else's role anymore. That night, I slept in the guest room at Samantha's house. Though I was exhausted, I barely slept. Still, I felt a little bit of the tension that had lived deep in my chest begin to loosen. The next morning, I stared at the ceiling for a while after waking up. My body still felt heavy, with a dull ache lingering in my head. But the suffocating air I felt in that house was gone. Samantha's home was peaceful. All I could hear were the faint sounds of morning life in the distance and the soft pour of coffee into a cup. I slowly sat up and picked up the phone from the nightstand. The number of notifications made my breath catch. There were over 30 messages from Mom on the screen. "Where did you go last night?" "I'm worried. You just left the present and disappeared without saying anything. Even David was hoping to see you." Each message was coded with carefully crafted kindness. None of them were genuine. Holding my phone, I went down to the living room. Samantha was in the kitchen, toasting bread. "Good morning. Did you sleep well?" I nodded slightly and showed her the screen. This was waiting for me when I woke up. Should I reply? Samantha looked me in the eye, then quietly let out a breath. "If you respond, it'll just be the same cycle all over again. What you need right now isn't a conversation. It's protection." Her words seemed to see right through my confusion. Protection? Yes. Protecting yourself and your rights. If you face your aunt in your current state, you'll just be drained again. And about the house and the trust fund, you should really take steps to secure them. I nodded, though I still felt unsure. The house and the trust fund my grandfather left me. It was clear, especially after what I heard yesterday, that my mother and brother considered them theirs by default. I never really thought about any of it before. They're family, so I assumed there was no ill will. But if what I heard was their true feelings, then I can't stay silent anymore. That's exactly right. Samantha said this as she placed the toast onto a plate. You don't have to hate them, but you can draw boundaries. It's not cold, it's the necessary action to protect yourself. What you've been doing all this time was trying to be the beloved daughter. But now, it's time to make choices as an independent adult. As I took a bite of the toast, I quietly reflected. My mother probably expected me to apologize right away. To say, "I'm sorry for the misunderstanding," and go back to how things were. But I wouldn't go back. I shouldn't. That day, Samantha introduced me to a trustworthy lawyer. Her name was Kimberly. A calm woman in her late 40s, she spoke with a soft tone, but every word carried weight. First, let's confirm the details of the trust fund. If it's managed under your name, we need to consider legal safeguards to prevent any unauthorized use. I nodded and took out the trust agreement my grandfather had drawn up before his passing, along with the documents for the house title. Kimberly reviewed each one carefully. Here's something that concerns me. There was a period when the agreement included a clause allowing temporary usage with family consent. Family, you mean my mother? Most likely, yes. There is a record showing that someone submitted a request to change the trustee once in the past. It was never approved, but there's no doubt someone tried to gain access. My chest tightened. I hadn't known. No one had ever told me anything about it. It may be best to restructure the trust so that full control rests with you alone, without requiring any consent or involvement from others. We can also restrict all financial information so that only a trusted lawyer or third party can access it. Would you like to proceed? Yes, please. I responded without hesitation, surprising even myself. It wasn't fear. It was a quiet resolve, something that had emerged beyond sadness and anger. In the past few days, I had begun to understand something. That kindness and self-protection can coexist. After speaking with Kimberly, I decided to review my medical records and health insurance registration. Until then, I had used the one my mother set up for me. But going forward, I would manage everything myself. It was my first true step toward independence. That night, over the dinner Samantha prepared, I smiled quietly. I feel like I'm slowly reclaiming my life. Samantha smiled back and poured water into my glass. Yes, you are. You're allowed to live your life for yourself now. Her words sank gently and deeply into my heart. After that, I spent about a week quietly at Samantha's house. Her thoughtful care and the calm atmosphere gradually eased my tension, and I began to feel more at peace. One afternoon, just after cleaning up lunch and folding the laundry, my phone buzzed softly. Kimberly's name appeared on the screen. Hello, Lauren. Do you have a moment? Her voice was as calm as always, but what she said next made my spine go cold. I need to inform you of something. During the investigation of the trust, we found multiple instances of unauthorized personal withdrawals. They were recorded as loans, but there is no history of repayment. I gasped. Who did it? The listed applicant is your mother. The records show withdrawals when you were 20, 23, and 26 years old, amounts ranging from $5,000 to $10,000. The stated purposes were household medical expenses and emergency living support. My mind went blank. Legally, what does that mean? If you choose to pursue it, this qualifies as misuse. You could press charges or file a damages claim. It all depends on your decision. I closed my eyes for a few seconds. Looking back, everything started to make sense. Paying for my education by myself. Her constant complaints about money even after I started working. How I always ended up covering for my brother every time he quit a job. She hadn't borrowed anything, she had taken it. Realizing that, the sorrow that had long settled in my heart quietly transformed into anger. I want to press charges against my mother. Please begin formal proceedings. I can't ignore this any longer. Kimberly's voice nodded in agreement. Understood. 2 days later, on a Saturday afternoon, I was reading a book alone at Samantha's house. She had gone out to buy groceries for dinner. In the strange silence, the doorbell suddenly rang. I wondered who it could be at this hour. When I opened the door, my mother and brother were standing there. It's been a while. My mother smiled. It was the same performative smile she always wore around others. Sorry to drop by unannounced. We just wanted to talk. My brother was dressed casually, hands stuffed in his pockets. I stared at them in silence. I had already decided I wouldn't run or hide. Still, my heart was pounding. Samantha's out, but if it's just for a bit. I let them into the living room. My mother looked around the room expectantly. My brother flopped down onto the couch like he owned the place. "You look well." "I'm relieved," my mother said as she stared intently at my face. "Hey, about that night, why did you leave without saying anything?" She leaned in and lowered her voice. "You finally came back, but you just left a gift and disappeared. We were worried, you know." But the tone of her voice held more annoyance than concern, like her plans had been disrupted. "Are you feeling okay? You just got out of the hospital, right? Did the doctor say you're really recovering?" My brother added, "You still don't look so good," muttering it while scanning me with calculating eyes. I stared at them silently. They clearly didn't know I had overheard their conversation that night. "I hope she doesn't get discharged." The inherited house was supposed to become ours. If I hadn't heard their true feelings, I might have been smiling with them right now. But my silence was no longer the silence of endurance. It was the beginning of a boundary. "Mom, I've decided to stop holding back. That night, I heard you and David say you hoped I wouldn't be discharged. That you wanted the house Grandpa left me." My mother's expression stiffened. "That was a misunderstanding. Neither of us meant it. We were just struggling financially, that's all." I cut her off. "I don't believe it was a misunderstanding. And I know everything you did." I took out the envelope Kimberly had given me from my bag. "These are the records from the trust fund investigation. They show the amounts you borrowed in my name without my consent." My brother leaned forward. "What is that? When did you start looking into all this?" "David, be quiet." Even I could hear the sharp edge in my voice. "I've decided to handle this legally. I'm not going to ignore it just because we're family." My mother's face drained of color. Her lips twitched, and she was visibly shaken. "You're really going to go that far? Are you serious?" "Yes, I am. While you were sending dozens of messages pretending to be worried, you were secretly using my assets for years. That says it all." After a long silence, my brother gave a dry laugh. "I was just helping because Mom asked me to. It's her responsibility, right?" So he was running away again. I looked at him with a quiet kind of disbelief, beyond shock. "You were both my family. But now, I no longer see either of you as people I can trust. From now on, stay out of my life and my property." When I finished, my heart was strangely calm. There was no guilt. No regret. My mother tried to say something but swallowed her words. My brother averted his eyes and got up, heading for the door. Once it closed behind them, I let out a long breath. It felt as if the weight that had been buried deep inside me was finally beginning to lift. At last, I was beginning to take back my life. After further discussion with Kimberly, we decided to initiate formal legal action. The evidence of trust fund misuse was sufficient to pursue both civil and criminal claims. Certified letters were sent to my mother and brother. Their responses were exactly what I expected. "Just a misunderstanding. We didn't mean it like that," they repeated. No sincere apology. No offer to repay. If anything, they acted like it was merely a family matter to be settled quietly. That only strengthened my resolve. 3 months later, I found myself in court. The courtroom was filled with a heavy silence, untouched by the warmth outside. I sat at the witness stand. In front of me were the judge and jury. To the left sat my mother. Even seated, she looked out of place and visibly anxious. Still, her hair was perfectly done, and she wore light makeup, desperately clinging to the version of herself meant for appearances. We had not spoken once since the lawsuit began. Not a single apology, no word from my brother either. My lawyer, Kimberly, calmly presented the facts. Unauthorized use of trust funds. 3 separate incidents of unapproved loans. False declarations. No attempts to repay, no effort to consult or confirm. The evidence I submitted included signed documents from those years, logs of communication with financial institutions, and my grandfather's written statement clearly naming me as the intended heir. My mother's lawyer claimed the defendant was in severe financial distress and acted for the sake of the family, without malicious intent. But I knew better. I knew how much of that distress she created herself. Covering my brother's expenses, spending on luxuries under the excuse of necessary costs, lying about my illness, telling people I was critical just to gather sympathy. Can someone like that really be said to have acted without ill intent? When called to the stand, I looked forward and spoke clearly. I wanted to believe I was loved. That's why I ignored everything about the money, the inheritance. But the night I came home from the hospital, I heard my mother and brother say, "I hope she doesn't get discharged. We want the house she inherited." That shattered everything. That was the truth. Even my illness was being used against me. I saw one of the jurors furrow their brow and glance toward my mother. Then came the day of the verdict. I sat once again in the gallery. My mother, unable to hide her tension, kept fidgeting with the papers in her hands. The judge read the decision in a steady voice. It is clear that the defendant misappropriated the trust assets without legal authority. These actions are deemed a breach of contract and carry elements of fraud. Therefore, the court imposes a civil repayment obligation, along with fines and partial criminal penalties. My mother let out a soft, pained sound. I watched her quietly. After the ruling, Kimberly leaned over and spoke gently. "You did well. This isn't just a victory. It's the establishment of a boundary." I nodded quietly. As I descended the courthouse steps, my mother called out from behind, chasing after me. "Lauren. Hey, did you really have to go this far? We're family. How could you do this?" I turned around. Her makeup was smudged, and for once it wasn't the face of a self-styled tragic heroine. It was raw confusion and fear. But I wasn't going to get drawn into her performance anymore. "I may be your daughter, but I won't be your victim. If being family means being used, having my illness exploited, and my inheritance stolen, then that's not family. You have to take responsibility for what you did." She opened her mouth but said nothing, then looked down. I turned away and walked off. I could feel her eyes on my back, but I didn't look back. Outside, I saw Samantha waving at me from a distance. Her presence filled me with relief, and I smiled faintly. This trial was never about revenge. It was a necessary passage away to reclaim my life. A life that belonged to no one but me. And to protect it, I had finally learned to say no. After the trial, I slowly began building a new life. A small studio apartment in a quiet area a bit away from the station. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine, a space no one could invade. The potted plant by the window had started to grow new leaves. My heart, too, was slowly beginning to heal. I returned to work. Not full-time yet, but I took on remote marketing projects 3 days a week. It wasn't overwhelming, but it gave me a sense of value. That pace felt just right. One Saturday, Samantha came over to cook lunch. While she moved efficiently around the kitchen, I sat at the dining table, tearing lettuce for the salad. "By the way, I heard something," she began gently. "I heard your mom and David are having a rough time right now." I paused my hands. Her face held no mockery or pity, just quiet truth. Between the fines and damages, they've been hit with quite a burden. I heard they sold the car and had to move. David still can't hold down a job, and they're living in a cheap apartment together. Even the people around them are starting to distance themselves. I absorbed her words in silence. "In the beginning, your mom was furious. Kept complaining to everyone, saying, 'Why is my daughter doing this to me?' But lately she started to change a bit. She's seeing a doctor now, going to counseling. I heard her say something like, 'I need to reevaluate how I think and how I interact with others.' I couldn't say yet if that was true reflection. But if she had finally started facing herself, I wasn't going to deny that step." "I see." That was all I said. I accepted it as fact. That was the closest I could get now. I think they need time to face themselves. And I've stopped hurting myself trying to save someone else. Samantha nodded and poured me a glass of water. "You've really changed. If this were a few months ago, I think you would have cried hearing that." "Yeah, probably." I smiled. Even to me, it felt like the most natural smile I'd ever worn. Later that afternoon, I stepped out onto the balcony and closed my eyes as I breathed in the fresh air. Even after hearing that my mother and brother had fallen from grace, I didn't feel like I'd won. What I wanted wasn't victory. It was the freedom to reclaim my life, on my terms. And now, I had finally found it. The scars hadn't completely vanished. But as each new day stacked gently on top, they were fading little by little. And I believe they will continue to fade